It is late. The city outside has finally quieted its roar to a distant hum, and in the soft glow of a designer lamp, the apartment looks like a page from a magazine. Every object is in its place, a testament to a life of success, of having arrived. But here, in the stillness, a different story unfolds. Alex sits, bathed in the cool blue light of a phone screen, the silence of the room amplifying a quiet hum of anxiety within. On the screen are not messages from friends or pictures from a recent vacation, but an array of numbers in a banking app. Some are black, but the ones that seem to shout into the darkness are red. They represent debt, obligations, a silent pressure that the beautiful objects in the room cannot soothe. This is a private, invisible weight, a feeling of being trapped behind the very walls that were meant to signify freedom. This scene, in countless rooms just like this one, is not a story of personal failure. It is a symptom of our time, a quiet epidemic of the soul. It is the deep, persistent unease that comes from living in a world that constantly whispers an unspoken promise. The promise that peace, happiness, and self-worth can be purchased, that they can be found in the next promotion, the next acquisition, the next upgrade. We are encouraged to chase a horizon that always recedes, leaving us with a hunger that is never truly satisfied, a particular kind of suffering, a financial wound that festers deep beneath the surface of our lives. But what if the cure for this wound is not found by earning more, or buying more, or achieving more? What if the solution does not lie outside of us at all? There exists an ancient path, a form of wisdom that has observed the intricate workings of the human mind for over 2,000 years. It offers not a plan to get rich quick, but a revolutionary way to change our fundamental relationship with money, and in doing so, to heal the anxiety it so often creates. This is a journey inward, a path to discover a freedom that is not dependent on the figures in our bank account, but on the state of our own heart. It is a path toward true wealth, the unshakable peace that comes from understanding ourselves and finding a profound sense of enough right here, right now. Before we can heal a wound, we must first learn to diagnose it. We must understand its nature, how deep it goes, and how it affects us. The financial wound that so many of us carry, that quiet hum of anxiety that followed Alex into the late hours of the night, has a name. It is born from a particular state of mind, a pervasive and often invisible filter through which we experience the world. It is the scarcity mindset. This mindset operates on a single, powerful, and deeply flawed assumption: there is not enough. There is not enough money, not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough success to go around. This belief is not a reflection of reality. It is a ghost that haunts the mind, whispering its fearful message, regardless of the numbers in our bank account. A person with millions of dollars can be tormented by the fear of losing it all, constantly feeling impoverished and insecure. Conversely, a person with very modest means can live with a sense of profound abundance, feeling grateful and secure in what they have. Scarcity, then, is not an external condition. It is an internal state of being. It is the feeling of poverty. This feeling is a powerful lens. When we look through it, the entire world appears hostile and competitive. A friend's success is not a cause for celebration, but a reminder of our own perceived failure. An unexpected bill is not merely an inconvenience, but a catastrophe in the making. The future is not a field of possibility, but a minefield of potential disasters. This voice of lack, this narrator of scarcity, is not you. But it is a voice that most of us have come to know intimately. It speaks with such authority, such conviction, that we mistake its anxious prophecies for undeniable truth. To begin the journey of healing, we must first understand where this voice came from. Its roots often burrow deep into the soil of our childhood. For many, it began with the things we overheard, the tension in the air when bills were discussed at the kitchen table. We heard phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or "We can't afford that." And these were not just statements of fact, they were emotional lessons. They taught us that money is a source of stress, that the world's resources are limited, and that desire often leads to disappointment. We absorbed our parents' anxieties, their financial struggles becoming the blueprint for our own relationship with money. A child who witnesses conflict over finances learns to associate money with danger, with instability, with the potential loss of love and security. This association becomes wired into the nervous system, an automatic, pre-verbal response that can persist for a lifetime, triggering a subtle state of panic whenever we have to deal with our own finances as adults. Then, society adds its own powerful voice to the chorus of scarcity. We are immersed in a culture that is a grand engine of desire. Advertisements, social media, and entertainment do not sell products. They sell the temporary cure for a manufactured sense of lack. They tell us, hundreds of times a day, that we are not enough as we are. We are not successful enough, not attractive enough, not happy enough. But this car, this watch, this vacation, this piece of clothing, this will be the thing that finally makes us whole. This constant messaging creates an artificial hunger, a belief that our inner peace is just one purchase away. Social media, in particular, acts as an amplifier for this, presenting us with a perfectly curated highlight reel of everyone else's lives. We scroll through images of lavish trips, new homes and expensive dinners, and the voice of scarcity whispers, "See, everyone else has it figured out. Everyone else has more. You are falling behind." We compare our messy, complex reality to their polished, edited fantasy, and the gap between the two becomes a fertile ground for anxiety and self-doubt. Finally, our own personal history adds the most convincing evidence to the case for scarcity. Perhaps we experienced a sudden job loss that pulled the rug out from under us. Or we started a business with great hope, only to see it fail. Maybe we accumulated a mountain of debt during a difficult period, a debt that now feels like a life sentence. These experiences are financial traumas. They leave scars on our psyche. The mind, in its effort to protect us from future pain, develops a hypervigilance. It creates the voice of scarcity to act as a sentry, constantly scanning the horizon for threats. "Don't take that risk," it warns. "Remember what happened last time? Hoard what you have. Be afraid." The intention of this inner guard is protective, but its effect is imprisoning. It builds a fortress of fear around us, and we become so afraid of what might happen that we are no longer able to live fully in the present. This leads to a devastating and self-perpetuating cycle. The constant feeling of scarcity, of being under threat, triggers our body's ancient stress response. The brain releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, preparing us for fight or flight. While this is useful for escaping a predator, it is incredibly damaging when it becomes a chronic, low-grade state of being. This state of stress literally changes how we think. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for rational thought, long-term planning, and creative problem-solving. We enter survival mode. In this state, we are far more likely to make poor financial decisions. We might reactively sell an investment during a market dip out of panic. We might avoid looking at our bills or bank statements because the anxiety is too overwhelming. A behavior that only allows problems to grow larger in the dark. We might cling desperately to a soul-crushing job because the fear of uncertainty is greater than the pain of our current reality. Or we might engage in impulsive retail therapy, trying to soothe the anxiety with a temporary hit of dopamine from a new purchase, only to feel worse when the credit card statement arrives. Each of these fear-based decisions often leads to a negative outcome, which then serves as powerful proof for the scarcity mindset. The voice inside says, "See, I told you so. You can't handle money. There really isn't enough. The world is a dangerous place." And so the loop tightens. The belief fuels the fear drives the behavior, and the behavior confirms the belief. We feel trapped, helpless, convinced that this is just the way things are. But it is not. The first step to breaking this cycle The first act of healing is not to fight the voice. It is not to argue with it or shame it or try to force it into silence. To do so is to give it more energy, to get entangled in its narrative. The first step, drawn from the heart of Buddhist practice, is breathtakingly simple. We learn to notice it. This is the practice of mindfulness, or Chan Nirm. It is the gentle, radical act of paying attention to our present moment experience without judgment. When the familiar wave of financial anxiety rises, when the voice of scarcity begins its litany of fears, we simply pause, we take a breath, and we notice. We notice the thought, "I will never have enough," as simply a thought. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to reject it. We just observe it, like a cloud passing through the vast sky of our awareness. We notice the feeling in our body, the tightness in the chest, the knot in the stomach. We just allow it to be there, without needing it to go away. In this simple act of non-judgmental observation, something miraculous happens. A space is created. For the first time, we begin to see that we are not the voice of scarcity. We are the one who hears the voice. We are not the anxiety. We are the one who feels the anxiety. This separation, however small, is the beginning of freedom. It is the loosening of a knot that we thought was permanent. There is an old story of a man who lived his entire life in a small, dilapidated hut. He was desperately poor, always struggling to find enough food, always shivering in the cold. He complained endlessly about his misfortune, convinced that he was the unluckiest man in the world. He lived and died in this state of misery. After he passed away, the new owner of the land decided to tear down the old hut. As they began to dig up the foundation, their shovels struck something hard. Buried just a few feet beneath the dirt floor where the man had slept every night was a massive chest filled with gold, jewels, and countless treasures. The man had been living on top of an inexhaustible fortune his entire life, but he never knew it. His poverty was not a result of a lack of wealth, but a lack of awareness. The voice of scarcity is the dirt floor of that hut. It is the convincing, everyday surface that tells us this is all there is. It keeps us from looking any deeper, from digging into the ground of our own being. Mindfulness is the act of picking up the shovel. It is the decision to gently begin exploring what lies beneath the surface of our habitual thoughts and fears. For buried within each of us is a treasure of incalculable worth. The innate capacity for peace, for contentment, for a profound and unshakable sense of enough. By learning to recognize the voice of lack, we have taken the first crucial step toward uncovering it. And as we continue, we must ask, what is this voice truly hungry for? What is the nature of the deep craving that fuels its constant fear? That is the next layer of the wound we must explore. That persistent voice of scarcity, the one that whispers there is never enough, is fueled by something deeper. It is fueled by a profound and gnawing hunger. This is not the simple, physical hunger for food that can be satisfied with a meal. It is a hunger of the spirit, a bottomless thirst for something more, a feeling that no matter what we acquire, a crucial piece is still missing. In the ancient psychological maps of Buddhism, this state of being is given a startlingly vivid image. It is the realm of the hungry ghost, or preta. To understand this image is to understand the very engine of modern consumerism and the anxiety it produces. Imagine a being with a colossal, distended stomach, a belly so vast it could hold all the riches of the world. This belly represents our desires, our wants, our endless list of things and experiences we believe will finally make us happy. Yet this creature has a long, impossibly thin neck and a mouth no bigger than the eye of a needle. No matter how much it tries to consume, it can never pour enough through that tiny opening to fill its cavernous belly. It is forever starving, forever thirsty, surrounded by the objects of its desire, yet perpetually unsatisfied. This is not a monster from a fairy tale. It is a powerful metaphor for a state of mind. It is the feeling of ordering a new gadget online, tracking the package with excitement, feeling a brief, fleeting thrill upon opening the box, and then, a day or two later, feeling a familiar flatness return, the mind already scanning for the next thing. It is the experience of working for months toward a financial goal, a specific number in a savings account, and upon reaching it, feeling not a lasting peace, but only the impulse to set a new, higher goal. We are living in a hungry ghost paradise. We are the ghosts, and our world is a feast we can never truly taste. The belly is our endless desire, and the pinhole mouth is the tragically brief and unsatisfying nature of material gratification. This state of mind is not an accident. It is cultivated, nurtured, and magnified by the world we have built around us. The entire architecture of our modern economy often functions as a temple dedicated to feeding this ghost. Consider the nature of advertising. Its primary purpose is not to inform you about the features of a product, but to make you feel a sense of lack without it. It presents you with images of people who are happier, more beautiful, more successful, and more loved. And it whispers that the bridge between your life and theirs is this one purchase. It creates the thirst, and then offers to sell you the water. It is an endlessly repeating cycle of manufactured inadequacy, followed by the promise of temporary relief. Social media has taken this dynamic and personalized it, making it exponentially more powerful. It is a voluntary, 24-hour immersion in the highlight reels of others' consumption. We see not just anonymous models in advertisements, but our friends, our peers, our colleagues, seemingly living lives of effortless abundance. We see their vacations, their new cars, their renovated kitchens. The desire that arises feels more personal, more acute. It's no longer a vague societal pressure, but a direct comparison that feeds our own internal narrative of falling behind. This creates a competitive, anxious environment where our spending is often a reaction to the perceived spending of others, a desperate attempt to keep up, to signal that we too are successful and happy. Our entire economic system, predicated on the idea of perpetual growth, relies on this ghost being perpetually hungry. For the machine to keep running, we must keep wanting. We are conditioned not just to be citizens or community members, but to be consumers. It is our primary identity, and our consumption is seen as a patriotic duty, a sign of a healthy economy. But what is healthy for the economy is not always healthy for the human soul. To be a good consumer from this perspective often means being a restless, unsatisfied spirit, forever chasing a contentment that is always just one more purchase away. This deep, driving thirst was diagnosed by the Buddha over 2,500 years ago. In the ancient Pali language, it is called tanha. The word literally translates as thirst, but it means so much more. It is not the simple natural desire for things we need, like food or shelter. Tanha is the obsessive, clinging, insatiable craving for sense pleasures, for status, for experiences, under the mistaken belief that they will provide lasting happiness and extinguish our suffering. The Buddha identified tanha as the root cause of our fundamental dissatisfaction with life, what he called dukkha. In his formulation of the Four Noble Truths, the foundational teaching of his entire philosophy, the second truth is this: the origin of suffering is craving. This is a revolutionary diagnosis. It tells us that our financial anxiety, our stress, our feeling of never having enough is not ultimately caused by the amount of money in our bank account. It is caused by the nature of our own wanting mind. The problem is not the external world's failure to give us what we want. The problem is the internal mechanism of wanting itself. This shifts the entire focus of our efforts. Instead of trying to rearrange the world to satisfy our every craving, which is an impossible task, we can begin to work with the craving itself. We can learn to understand its nature, to see how it operates within us, and to find a freedom that does not depend on its satisfaction. The constant need for more money, more security, more possessions is a direct expression of tanha. We believe that if we can just quench this thirst, our suffering, our anxiety will cease. But this is a tragic illusion, perfectly captured in a simple parable. A man is lost at sea, dying of thirst under the blazing sun. He is surrounded by water, stretching to the horizon in every direction. In his desperation, he cups his hands, brings the water to his lips, and drinks deeply. For a fleeting moment, the coolness soothes his dry throat. But this is salt water. The immediate relief is quickly replaced by an even more intense, more agonizing thirst than before. The very act of trying to quench his thirst is what will ultimately destroy him. This is the mechanism of tanha. This is the trap of the hungry ghost. Every time we indulge a craving for a non-essential purchase, hoping it will bring us happiness, we are drinking salt water. The brief pleasure soon fades, but the underlying thirst, the habit of wanting, has been strengthened. We have trained our mind to believe that the solution to inner unease is an outer acquisition, and so the next time the unease arises, the craving will be even stronger. We find ourselves in a feedback loop, a cycle of wanting and buying that brings no lasting peace, only a deeper thirst. The first step in breaking this cycle is, once again, mindfulness. Just as we learn to observe the voice of scarcity, we can learn to observe the feeling of desire. The next time you feel a strong urge to buy something you don't truly need, try a small experiment. Don't act on it immediately. Don't suppress it either. Just pause. Close your eyes for a moment. Where do you feel this wanting in your body? Is it a tension in the chest? An energy in the hands? A restlessness in the legs? What are the thoughts attached to it? This will make me feel better. I deserve this. If I don't get this now, I'll miss out. Simply watch these sensations and thoughts without judgment. You are not trying to make them go away. You are simply studying the nature of the thirst itself. What you will discover, if you stay with it long enough, is that the craving is impermanent. Like every other sensation and thought, it arises, it peaks, and if you don't feed it, it will eventually subside on its own. In that space, you will find a quiet power. You are no longer a slave to the thirst. You are learning to let it pass. This hunger, however, is not just for things themselves. We rarely want a luxury car simply for its engineering. We want it for the feeling it gives us, for the status it signals. This craving for objects is deeply entangled with our craving for identity. And so we must ask, what do we believe these possessions say about who we are? Why do we tie our very sense of self to the things we own? The hunger we explored, that deep and restless craving for more, is not just a desire for objects themselves. It is a desire for what we believe those objects will give us. We seek not the leather seats of a luxury car, but the feeling of success and admiration they are supposed to provide. We desire not just the square footage of a larger house, but the sense of security and status we hope to find within its walls. This reveals a deeper, more subtle mechanism at the heart of our financial anxiety. We have learned to fuse our very sense of self with the things we own and the money we possess. We have come to believe, on a level deeper than words, in a simple and dangerous equation. I am what I have. This identification is the root of a profound and fragile existence. Think about how this process begins. It starts in small ways, a quiet conditioning that unfolds over a lifetime. A child is praised for having the newest toy. A teenager navigates the complex social world where brands and logos serve as badges of belonging. As adults, this conditioning solidifies. Our job title, the neighborhood we live in, the car we drive, the vacations we post online, these become the primary ways we communicate our identity to the world and, more importantly, to ourselves. The human mind, in many ways, is a storyteller. Its main character is the self, the sense of I that feels like the chief executive officer sitting in the control room of our head. But this self is an abstract concept, and it craves tangible evidence of its own existence and value. It latches onto external things, possessions, accomplishments, reputation as proof. My expensive watch proves I am successful. My curated home proves I have good taste. My large savings account proves I am responsible and secure. Each possession becomes a sentence in the autobiography we are writing. We become the dedicated curators of our own personal museums, carefully arranging the exhibits of our lives to project an image of who we believe we are or who we want to be. The danger arises when we forget that we are the curator and start to believe we are the collection itself. We are no longer the consciousness that is experiencing life. We become the car, the house, the job title. Our sense of worth becomes as fragile and as external as the objects it is built upon. This is where one of the most profound and often misunderstood teachings of Buddhism offers a radical perspective. It is the teaching of anatta, or no self. This does not mean that you do not exist. You are clearly here, breathing, thinking, and feeling. What it means is that there is no permanent, solid, unchanging, independent I to be found anywhere within you. What we call the self is not a static noun, but a dynamic verb. It is a process, a constantly shifting constellation of 5 elements, known as the aggregates or skandhas. These are our physical body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental formations like thoughts and biases, and our consciousness. These 5 processes are in a constant state of flux, arising and passing away from moment to moment. Think of a river. You can point to it and call it the river, but you can never step in the same river twice. The water is always moving. The banks are always subtly changing. The word river is a convenient label for a dynamic process. The word self is the same. There is no fixed you separate from the ever-changing flow of your body, thoughts, and feelings. The suffering begins when this fluid, process-like self tries to cling to things in an attempt to make itself feel more solid and permanent. This clinging is called upadana. When we engage in upadana, we are taking our fluid, river-like nature and desperately trying to anchor it to a rock on the shore. We say, I am this rock. This possession, this status, this bank account, this is me. We are trying to build a permanent identity out of temporary things. This is the definition of a futile and stressful struggle. We are building our house on shifting sand and then spending all of our energy in a state of constant anxiety, trying to prevent the sand from moving. This clinging to a false, possession-based identity is a direct cause of our deepest financial fears. The emotional consequences of this mistaken identity are twofold, and they are intimately familiar to most of us: fear and envy. First, the fear of loss becomes all-encompassing. If your identity is fused with your material wealth, then any threat to that wealth is not just a financial problem, it becomes an existential crisis. A stock market downturn is no longer a simple fluctuation in numbers. It is a personal attack on your very worth as a human being. The prospect of losing your job is not just the loss of income. It is the terrifying disintegration of the successful person you thought you were. This is why financial setbacks can feel so intensely shameful and personal. We feel that I have failed, that I am diminished, because we have forgotten that our true nature is the vast, open awareness that is experiencing the loss, not the temporary identity that has been lost. The second consequence is a pervasive and poisonous envy. If my self-worth is measured on a scale of material success, then anyone who has more than me automatically makes me feel like less. Their success becomes a direct reflection of my inadequacy. We get trapped in a relentless game of comparison, a game that is impossible to win, because the goalposts are always moving, and there will always be someone with a bigger house, a faster car, or a more extravagant vacation. Envy is the painful shadow that is inevitably cast when the light of our self-worth is filtered through the lens of our possessions. There is a timeless story that illustrates this perfectly. A powerful king, living in a magnificent palace, possessed all the wealth and power imaginable. Yet, he was tormented. He slept poorly, plagued by worries. He worried about his kingdom being invaded, about his treasures being stolen, about his subjects betraying him. his identity was completely fused with his kingdom, so every threat to the kingdom felt like a threat to his very being. One day, he went to visit a meditating monk who lived in a simple cave at the edge of a forest. The monk had nothing but a single robe and a bowl for begging food. Yet, he radiated a profound sense of peace and contentment. The king, exasperated, asked him, "How can you be so happy?" "You have nothing." The monk smiled and replied, "That is precisely why I am happy. You, great king, have so much to worry about. I have nothing to lose." The king's wealth was his prison. The monk's lack of possessions was his freedom. The monk's identity was not invested in anything external that could be threatened or taken away. His wealth was his inner peace, a treasure far more valuable than all the king's gold. The path to cultivating this inner wealth is the practice of meditation. You do not need to move to a cave. You can simply sit for a few minutes each day and watch the workings of your own mind. This is the laboratory where you can investigate the nature of the self. As you sit, you will notice thoughts arising and passing. You will notice feelings coming and going. You will see the desire for a new thing surface in the mind and then dissolve. In this quiet observation, you begin to experience directly that you are not these fleeting thoughts and feelings. You are the silent, spacious awareness in which they all appear. This practice gently, patiently, untangles the knot of identification. You are not your bank account. You are not your job. You are not your house. You are the sky, and they are just the clouds. Untangling our sense of self from the things we own is a monumental step toward freedom. But this deep-seated habit of clinging is driven by an even more fundamental belief, an assumption that lies at the heart of our entire culture, the belief that getting more will inevitably lead to more happiness. To find lasting peace, we must turn our attention to this core premise and ask a simple, powerful question: is it actually true? At the very heart of our restless striving, our endless pursuit of more, lies a foundational promise whispered by our culture from the moment we are born. It is the promise that happiness is an acquisition. If I can just get that promotion, buy that house, reach that number in my retirement account, then I will have arrived. Then the anxiety will cease. Then I will finally be able to relax and feel a lasting sense of peace. This belief is the engine of our economy and the blueprint for countless lives. It is so deeply ingrained in us that we rarely think to question it. But what if this promise, the most fundamental promise of a consumer society, is based on a profound misunderstanding of the human mind? What if the finish line we are all racing towards is actually the starting line of another, identical race? What if we are all running on a treadmill, convinced that with just a little more effort, we will finally get somewhere? This is not a cynical proposition. It is a description of a well-documented psychological phenomenon, a mental loop that keeps millions of us trapped in a state of quiet dissatisfaction. It is called the hedonic treadmill. To understand this treadmill, consider a common and relatable life event: receiving a significant pay raise. In the beginning, there is a genuine sense of euphoria. A wave of relief washes over you. A new field of possibilities opens up. Now I can finally afford the things I've always wanted, you think. Now my money worries will be over. You might upgrade your car, move to a nicer apartment, or start eating at more expensive restaurants. For a time, this new lifestyle brings a noticeable boost in happiness. But then, something subtle and predictable begins to happen. The new car, once a source of daily excitement, simply becomes the car, the vehicle that gets you to work. The bigger apartment, once a symbol of success, becomes just home, with its own set of chores and repairs. The higher salary becomes the new baseline, the new normal. Your spending habits and expectations rise to meet your new income, a phenomenon often called lifestyle creep. A year later, you look at your life, and to your surprise, your general day-to-day level of happiness has returned to almost exactly where it was before the raise. The only real difference is that your financial obligations are now greater. The treadmill has not stopped. it is simply sped up. You are still running, but the landscape never changes. This is the hedonic treadmill in action. The hedonic part refers to pleasure and enjoyment. The treadmill part refers to the fact that you have to keep running just to stay in the same place. The initial joy that comes from a positive change or a new purchase is real, but it is fleeting. Our minds are remarkably quick to adapt and normalize new circumstances. The thrill evaporates, and we are left where we started, looking for the next thing, the next purchase, the next achievement that we believe will finally deliver the lasting happiness that the last one only promised. This modern psychological insight is a perfect illustration of two of the most ancient and central concepts in Buddhist thought, samsara and anicca. Samsara is the famous wheel of life, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, characterized by dissatisfaction and stress. While this is often understood on a cosmological scale, it is also a powerful metaphor for our psychological experience. The hedonic treadmill is a personal, financial samsara. It is the cycle of craving a new reality, achieving it, adapting to it, growing dissatisfied, and beginning to crave another new reality. It is a state of perpetual wandering, driven by the hope that the next destination will be the final one, while being blind to the fact that the nature of the journey itself is the problem. The key to stepping off this wheel is a deep, experiential understanding of the second concept, anicca, which means impermanence. Anicca is a fundamental law of nature. It states that everything that comes into being is subject to change and will eventually pass away. Nothing is permanent. Our bodies change, our thoughts are a fleeting parade, our emotions are like the weather, and the universe itself is in a constant state of flux. The pleasure we get from a new possession is no exception. It is, by its very nature, impermanent. The suffering we experience on the hedonic treadmill does not come from the fact that the pleasure fades. The pleasure is supposed to fade. That is, its nature. The suffering comes from our resistance to this fact. We cling to the pleasurable feeling. We expect it to last, and when it inevitably disappears, we feel disappointed, frustrated, and as if something has gone wrong. We are trying to build a permanent shelter out of clouds, and then we wonder why it keeps dissolving. We are trying to grasp a fistful of water, and we are endlessly frustrated that it keeps slipping through our fingers. The hedonic treadmill is a battle against the fundamental law of impermanence, and it is a battle we can never win. This reveals a crucial distinction we must make if we are to find true peace. We must learn to differentiate between fleeting pleasure and genuine well-being. Pleasure, what the ancient Greeks called hedonia, is the temporary, stimulus-driven joy we get from external things. It is the taste of a sweet fruit, the warmth of the sun, the thrill of a new purchase. It is wonderful, but it is inherently unreliable as a source of lasting happiness, because it is subject to the law of diminishing returns and the reality of impermanence. The pursuit of pleasure alone is what keeps us on the treadmill. Genuine well-being, on the other hand, which we can call sukha in the Buddhist tradition, is a deeper and more durable state of contentment and inner peace. It is not dependent on external circumstances. It is a quality that is cultivated from within. It arises from wisdom, from living an ethical life, from compassion, and from a mind that is calm and clear. The goal of a spiritual path is not to find a way to make pleasure last forever. It is to cultivate this inner well-being, this sukha, so that our happiness is no longer held hostage by the inevitably changing conditions of the world. It is about getting off the treadmill, not learning to run faster. There is a beautiful image for how to live in this world of constant change. It is the image of a child on a beach, building a magnificent sandcastle. The child is completely absorbed in the process. She is joyful, creative, and fully present as she pats the sand, builds the towers, and digs the moat. She is not obsessing over the castle's future. She is not anxious about its preservation. She is simply enjoying the act of creation. When the tide begins to roll in and a wave finally washes over her masterpiece, returning it to a shapeless mound of wet sand, there may be a brief flicker of disappointment. But there is no deep, existential despair. She does not scream at the ocean for being an ocean. She does not fall into a crisis of identity because her creation is gone. On some intuitive level, she understands the nature of sandcastles. They are beautiful, they are fun to build, and they are temporary. This is the wisdom of embracing impermanence. The practice for us is to bring this sandcastle mind to our financial lives. We can work, we can earn, we can even build beautiful things. But we do so with a light touch, understanding and accepting their transient nature. We can enjoy the process of building our lives without desperately clinging to the finished products, knowing that they, too, will eventually be washed away by the tides of time. This clear-eyed view of our predicament, this understanding of the treadmill of our own minds, is a profound and liberating insight. It prepares us to apply one of the most powerful diagnostic tools ever conceived for human suffering directly to our relationship with money and the anxiety it creates. We are now ready to explore the four noble truths of financial suffering. Having journeyed through the inner landscape of our financial lives, we have uncovered the subtle patterns that hold us captive. We have heard the anxious voice of scarcity, felt the insatiable hunger of the hungry ghost, seen the fragile identity we build from our possessions, and witnessed the futile motion of the hedonic treadmill. Each of these is a piece of a larger puzzle. Now, we are ready to assemble them into a coherent whole, to see the complete picture of our condition not as a random collection of problems, but as a predictable process with a clear cause and, most importantly, a clear solution. To do this, we turn to the very heart of the Buddha's teaching, a framework so practical and profound that it has been used as a tool for healing the human mind for millennia. This framework is the Four Noble Truths. These are not articles of faith to be blindly believed. They are a diagnosis, a prognosis, and a prescription offered by a master physician of the mind. The Buddha often compared himself to a doctor who, out of great compassion, addresses suffering in the most direct and effective way possible. Let us now apply this timeless medical framework to the specific ailment of our modern financial anxiety. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering, or dukkha. The physician's first step is to courageously and honestly name the illness. In our context, this means acknowledging, without shame or judgment, that our relationship with money is often a source of deep and pervasive stress. This is financial dukkha. It is the knot of anxiety in your stomach when you think about your debts. It is the restless, sleepless night before a big bill is due. It is the subtle but sharp sting of envy when you see others enjoying a level of wealth you feel is unattainable. It is the feeling of being trapped in a job you dislike because you need the security of the paycheck. It is the chronic, low-grade fear about the future, about retirement, about unforeseen emergencies. It is the nagging feeling of never having enough, a feeling that can persist whether you have $10 or $10 million in the bank. The purpose of this first truth is not to be pessimistic or to wallow in misery. It is an act of profound self-compassion. It is looking at our own wound and saying, this is real, this is stressful, this hurts. For a wound to be healed, it must first be acknowledged. By naming our financial dukkha, we stop pretending everything is fine, and we give ourselves permission to seek a genuine remedy. The second noble truth is the truth of the origin of suffering, or samudaya. Once the illness is diagnosed, the physician must identify its cause. If the cause is misidentified, the treatment will fail. Herein lies the most revolutionary insight. The Buddha declared that the cause of our suffering is not external. It is not the economy, not your boss, not bad luck, and ultimately, not the amount of money you have. The true cause of our financial dukkha lies within our own minds. It is our inner reaction to our outer circumstances. This cause has three primary components, which we have already explored. The first is tanha, the relentless craving, the thirst for more money, more possessions, more status, fueled by the mistaken belief that these things will bring us lasting happiness. The second is upadana, the clinging or attachment, the way we fuse our very identity to our financial standing, making any financial setback feel like a personal annihilation. The third is avidya, the fundamental ignorance or misunderstanding of reality. We suffer because we are ignorant of the law of impermanence, anicca, expecting fleeting pleasures to be permanent. We are ignorant of the mechanism of the hedonic treadmill, believing the next acquisition will be the one that finally makes us happy. This second truth is incredibly empowering. If the cause of our anxiety were purely external, we would be helpless victims, tossed about by the unpredictable waves of the world. But because the cause is internal or own habits of mind, our craving, our clinging, our ignorance, we have agency. We have the power to change our experience from the inside out. We cannot always control the economy, but we can, with practice, learn to work with our own minds. The source of the problem is the key to the solution. The third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering, or nirodha. After diagnosing the illness and identifying its cause, the physician gives the patient the all-important prognosis: a cure is possible. There is an end to the suffering. This is the truth of hope. Nirodha means cessation, and in this context, it refers to the end of financial dukkha. It is the possibility of a state of profound peace and freedom. What does this state look like? It does not necessarily mean becoming fabulously wealthy. It means attaining true financial freedom, which is an internal state, not an external one. It is freedom from the tyranny of craving. It is freedom from the anxiety of attachment. It is freedom from the constant, gnawing fear about money. It is a state where you can relate to money as a simple tool to be used wisely and skillfully, rather than as a measure of your self-worth or a source of your identity. It is the deep, abiding, and unshakable feeling of enough. It is a quiet mind, a heart at peace, a sense of well-being that is not dependent on market fluctuations or the size of your portfolio. This state of inner wealth, this nirodha, is not a distant, mythical fantasy. It is a real and attainable human potential. The fourth noble truth is the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, or magga. This is the physician's prescription, the detailed treatment plan that will lead the patient from sickness to health. This path is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a set of rigid commandments, but a holistic guide for living, a set of 8 interconnected practices that, when cultivated together, systematically dismantle the causes of suffering. This path is the very medicine we need to heal our financial wounds. It is traditionally divided into 3 sections. The first is wisdom, which includes right view, seeing the world and our financial lives as they truly are, which is precisely what we have been doing by exploring these truths. It also includes right intention, which means consciously dedicating ourselves to the path of healing, cultivating intentions of letting go, of kindness, and of harmlessness in our financial dealings. The second section is ethical conduct, which includes right speech, speaking truthfully and kindly about money, avoiding gossip, boasting, or complaining. It includes right action, ensuring our earning and spending habits do not cause harm to ourselves or others. And it includes right livelihood, engaging in work that is honorable and aligns with our values. The third section is mental discipline. This includes right effort, the gentle but persistent energy we apply to the practice. It includes right mindfulness, the moment-to-moment awareness of our financial thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which we will soon explore in great detail. And finally, it includes right concentration, the ability to develop a calm, stable, and focused mind. These 4 truths, taken together, provide a complete roadmap. The physician has examined us and given a clear diagnosis. We suffer from financial dukkha. He has identified its internal cause, our craving, clinging, and ignorance. He has given us a hopeful prognosis. A state of true financial freedom is possible. and He has written us a prescription, the Noble Eightfold Path. The journey from diagnosis to cure is laid out before us. All that is left is for us to begin taking the medicine, one gentle step at a time. And the very first dose begins with the simple act of paying attention. We have arrived at the threshold of practice. The diagnosis has been made, the nature of the illness understood, and the path to healing laid before us. Now, we must take the first dose of the medicine prescribed by the great physician. This first dose is the practice of right mindfulness, or Shan Nirm. It is the art of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. But this practice does not need to begin in a quiet room on a meditation cushion. In fact, its most potent application happens in the noisy, chaotic marketplace of our everyday lives. It begins the moment we reach for our wallet, the moment we pull out our credit card, the moment our finger hovers over the Buy Now button. For most of us, spending money is one of the most unconscious activities we perform. It is a deeply ingrained habit, an automatic reflex often driven by forces we barely perceive. We can change that. We can transform the mundane act of transaction into a profound moment of awareness. We can learn to listen to the breath of our cash flow. Think about how we typically eat a meal while distracted. Imagine sitting in front of a television, completely absorbed in a show, while mindlessly bringing a forkful of food to your mouth, chewing and swallowing. At the end of the meal, you might look down at the empty plate with a vague sense of surprise. You know you have eaten, but you cannot recall the taste of the food, its texture, or its aroma. You consumed the calories, but you missed the entire experience of nourishment. Unconscious spending is the financial equivalent of this. We move through our days, and when an internal itch, a raziza feeling of boredom, a pang of loneliness, a wave of stress, a flicker of inadequacy, we scratch it with a purchase. We are not making a conscious choice. We are simply reacting. The click of a button, the tap of a card, becomes a conditioned response to emotional discomfort. The brief relief this provides is real, but like the distracted eater, we often look at our bank statement at the end of the month with the same vague surprise. We know we have spent the money, but we can't always remember the feeling or the reason behind each transaction. We see the financial calories we have consumed, but we have missed the experience. We have simply reacted over and over, reinforcing a habit that keeps us trapped. The practice to break this cycle is radically simple. It requires no special equipment, only a willingness to introduce a single, powerful element into the moment of transaction, a pause. Let us call it the sacred pause. It is the moment you reclaim your power from the grip of habit. The practice unfolds like this. The next time you feel the impulse to buy something that is not an absolute necessity, the moment the wanting arises, you are at a crossroads. The familiar, well-worn path is to act on it immediately. The new path is to simply stop. For just a moment. Don't move your hand toward your wallet. Don't move your cursor toward the button. Just freeze. Then, take one single, conscious breath. Breathe in and feel the air enter your lungs. Breathe out and feel a slight release in your body. This breath is an anchor. It is a circuit breaker that interrupts the automatic, unconscious flow of energy from impulse to action. In the space created by this single breath, you can begin a gentle inquiry. You are not interrogating yourself. You are not judging yourself. You are simply becoming a curious scientist of your own inner world. You can ask yourself a series of simple questions. First, what am I feeling right now in this moment? Look underneath the desire for the object. Is the feeling boredom, anxiety, sadness? Are you feeling envious because you just saw something on social media? Are you feeling stressed from a long day at work? Simply name the feeling without needing to fix it. Ah, this is boredom. Second, why do I believe I need this item? Be honest. Is it a genuine need? Something that will solve a real problem? Or support your well-being in a meaningful way? Or is it a want, a desire to soothe the feeling you just identified? I believe this will make me feel better. Third, what is the story I am telling myself about this purchase? Our minds are master storytellers. Perhaps the story is, I work so hard, I deserve a treat. Or, if I have this, others will see me as successful. Or, this will finally make me feel organized and in control. Acknowledge the story without necessarily believing it. The story is that this purchase will bring me happiness. Finally, you can ask, is there another, more skillful way to attend to the feeling I am having right now? If the feeling is loneliness, could you call a friend instead of buying a new shirt? If the feeling is stress, could you step outside for a walk instead of ordering expensive takeout? If the feeling is boredom, could you read a chapter of a book? Or listen to a piece of music instead of endlessly scrolling and shopping online? The purpose of this sacred pause is not necessarily to prevent you from ever buying anything again. Sometimes, after this inquiry, you may still decide to make the purchase, but now it will be a conscious choice, not a mindless reaction. More often than not, however, the simple act of shining the light of awareness on the impulse is enough to rob it of its power. You will see that the desire was just a temporary weather pattern in the mind, and that it will pass on its own if you don't feed it. You are stepping out of the role of the reactive consumer and into the role of the wise observer of your own mind. To support this practice, you can transform another often dreaded financial task, tracking your expenses. For many, looking at a budget or a bank statement is a moment of judgment and shame. We see our spending and we criticize ourselves. I can't believe I wasted so much money on that. This approach is counterproductive. It makes us want to avoid looking at our finances altogether. Let us reframe this. Mindful expense tracking is not an act of judgment. It is an act of meditation. It is like a form of walking meditation where every transaction is a footstep that you observe with gentle, non-judgmental awareness. As you review your spending at the end of the week or month, you are not looking for reasons to scold yourself. You are looking at data. You are a compassionate historian, tracing the footsteps of your past self. You can look at a line item and say, "Ah, interesting. I see a lot of charges for coffee shops that week. I must have been feeling tired and needing a change of scenery." Or, "There's that big online purchase. I remember feeling very anxious that day, and I was looking for a distraction." Each transaction is a clue. It is a message from your past self about what was happening in your inner world. Seen this way, your bank statement becomes a map of your own heart, showing you the places where you sought comfort, where you felt insecure, where you were joyful, and where you were simply on autopilot. This is the power of mindfulness in action. It creates a space. It inserts a moment of wisdom between the stimulus of the world and our habitual response. Before this practice, the impulse to buy and the action of buying were fused together into a single, lightning-fast event. Now, with the breath, with the gentle inquiry, a gap has appeared. And in this gap, choice is born. Freedom is born. You are no longer a puppet pulled by the invisible strings of advertising and emotion. You are reclaiming your agency. You are making conscious decisions that are aligned with your deepest values and your long-term well-being. By observing our habits of spending so closely, by becoming intimate with the feelings that drive them, we inevitably start to notice recurring themes. We notice that so many of our unconscious purchases, so many of the desires that arise, are not born in a vacuum. They are sparked by what we see around us, by what others have. And so, our practice of mindfulness leads us directly to the doorstep of one of the most powerful engines of dissatisfaction in the modern world, the habit of comparison. The practice of mindfulness, of pausing and looking inward before we spend, begins to reveal the subtle triggers that drive our financial behavior. As we watch our own minds with gentle curiosity, a recurring pattern emerges with startling clarity. We notice how often the impulse to buy, the sudden feeling of lack, is sparked not by an internal need, but by an external glance. We see a friend's vacation photos, a colleague's new car, a beautifully curated home on the internet, and in that instant, a quiet contentment we may have been feeling evaporates, replaced by a familiar, inconfortable pang. This is the pain of comparison, and in our hyper-connected world, it has become one of the most powerful and persistent sources of financial and emotional suffering. Comparison is the thief of joy. It is an inner poison that can transform a perfectly good life into a source of constant dissatisfaction. Our modern world has constructed the most efficient comparison engine ever known to humanity: social media. It is a stage where we are all, simultaneously, the audience and the performers. But the performance is not an honest depiction of life. It is a meticulously edited highlight reel. People post their victories, their travels, their picture-perfect moments, their new acquisitions. They do not post their arguments, their debts, their lonely evenings, their self-doubt. We know this intellectually, yet on a deep, emotional level, we forget. We scroll through this endless stream of curated perfection, and we unconsciously compare our own messy, complex, behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's polished final cut. The result is a profoundly skewed perception of the world. We begin to believe that everyone else is happier, wealthier, and more successful than we are. This creates a psychological chasm between the life we have and the life we think we should have. And this chasm becomes a breeding ground for envy, inadequacy, and anxiety. This envy is a form of financial pain. It whispers that our car is not good enough, our home is too small, our life is too plain. It fuels the scarcity mindset, creating a false narrative that happiness and success are limited resources, and that someone else's gain is somehow our loss. To soothe this pain, we are driven to spend. We try to close the perceived gap with purchases, engaging in a global digital version of keeping up with the Joneses. We buy things not because we need them, but to signal to the world and to ourselves that we are not being left behind. We are spending money we may not have to curate our own highlight reel, all in a desperate attempt to quiet the inner voice of comparison. This is a game we can never win. There will always be someone with more. It is a treadmill of envy, powered by our own attention, and it leads only to exhaustion and debt. How do we break free? The common advice is to simply stop comparing ourselves to others. But this is like telling someone to stop thinking about a blue horse. The very effort to suppress the thought makes it stronger. The Buddhist approach is far more skillful. It does not try to suppress the negative state of mind, but instead, it actively cultivates its opposite. Just as light dispels darkness, certain positive emotions, when intentionally practiced, have the power to dissolve envy and jealousy. These are known as the Brahma Viharas, or the sublime states, and two in particular are the direct antidote to the poison of comparison. The first and most revolutionary is mudita, which is often translated as sympathetic or appreciative joy. Mudita is the ability to feel happiness at the good fortune of others. This is a radical act in a culture that thrives on competition. When we feel the pang of envy upon seeing someone's success, we are experiencing their happiness as a source of our own pain. Mudita flips this equation entirely. It trains the mind to experience their happiness as a source of our own happiness. It dismantles the scarcity mindset by recognizing that joy is not a limited resource. The sun does not have less light because it is shining on someone else. The practice of mudita can begin the very next time you are scrolling through your phone. You see a picture of a friend on a beautiful beach. The familiar pang of envy arises. I wish I were there. My life is so boring. In this moment, you have a choice. You can follow that familiar, painful path, or you can pause. Take a breath. Look at the image again. Look at the smile on your friend's face. And instead of focusing on your own feeling of lack, consciously shift your attention to their experience of joy. Then, silently, from your heart, offer them this wish. May you be happy. I am happy, that you are happy. May you enjoy this beautiful moment completely. It may feel mechanical or even fake at first. That is normal. You are exercising a muscle that has been dormant for a long time. But with repetition, something remarkable begins to happen. The contracted, painful feeling of envy starts to loosen its grip. A small space opens up, and in that space, a genuine feeling of warmth can arise. You are turning a trigger for your own suffering into an opportunity to feel a moment of shared joy. This practice transforms the world from a source of competition into a source of boundless opportunity for happiness. If you can feel joy, not only from your own good fortune, but from the good fortune of the 7 billion other people on the planet, you will never be short of reasons to be happy. The ability to practice mudita is supported by the cultivation of its sibling, metta, or loving kindness. It is very difficult to be happy for others if we are not, on a fundamental level, at peace with ourselves. If our inner dialogue is one of harsh self-criticism, we will naturally project that judgment onto the world. Metta is the practice of developing an attitude of unconditional friendship towards oneself. It is the simple, powerful wish. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be at peace. When you feel the pain of comparison, it is an opportunity to offer this kindness to yourself. You can acknowledge the pain by saying, "This feeling of envy is painful. May I be free from this pain. May I learn to be content with my own life, my own journey." This is not self-pity, it is self-compassion. It is recognizing that your own peace is just as important as anyone else's. There is a simple story that captures the folly of abandoning oneself for the sake of comparison. A crow, who was perfectly happy being a crow, one day saw a swan gliding gracefully on a crystal-clear lake. The swan's feathers were a brilliant, dazzling white, and it moved with an elegance the crow had never seen. From that moment on, the crow became deeply dissatisfied. The swan is the most beautiful creature in the world, it thought. Its white feathers are a sign of its purity. My black feathers are ugly. My cawing voice is harsh. I want to be a swan. The crow began to obsessively imitate the swan. It abandoned its home in the trees and tried to live by the water. It stopped eating the food that crows eat and tried to eat the watery weeds that swans eat. It spent its days trying to stretch its neck and glide on the water, but it only managed to look clumsy and foolish. Over time, the crow grew weak and sick. It had forgotten how to live as a crow, and it could never learn to be a swan. In trying to become something else, it lost the very vitality and strength that came from being true to its own nature. This is the fate of a life lived by comparison. We waste our precious energy trying to imitate the highlight reels of others, forgetting the unique beauty and value of our own path. Practicing mudita and metta is the way we learn to be happy as a crow. It is the way we learn to appreciate the beauty of the swan without feeling the need to become one. It frees us from the exhausting work of imitation and allows us to invest our energy in becoming the best version of ourselves. When we are no longer driven by the need to keep up, we can finally begin to ask a much deeper question: what do I truly need? What is essential? This opens the door to the liberating art of simplicity. Having learned to quiet the voice of comparison, to shield ourselves from the endless external pressure to acquire more, we can now turn our attention inward. We can look around at the world we have already built, the physical landscape of our lives. For many of us, this landscape is crowded. Our homes have become not just shelters, but storage units. They are museums of past intentions, archives of former hobbies, and mausoleums for things we once thought would make us happy. A life lived out of overflowing closets, cluttered countertops, and crowded garages carries a hidden psychic weight. We have stopped the influx of new acquisitions driven by envy, but what do we do with the accumulated sediment of a lifetime of unconscious consumption? The answer lies in rediscovering one of the most ancient and potent paths to freedom, the path of simplicity. In our modern culture, minimalism is often mistaken for an aesthetic. It conjures images of stark white walls, empty rooms, and a life of severe, joyless austerity. But this is a shallow interpretation. True simplicity, from a spiritual perspective, is not about deprivation. It is about liberation. It is not about what you remove from your life, but about what you create space for. It is the conscious, intentional, and joyful process of curating your life to include only that which is truly essential and deeply nourishing. It is the art of coming home to yourself by clearing away everything that is not you. Every object you own demands something from you. It is not a passive item sitting in a room. It is an active relationship. It demands your time for cleaning and maintenance. It demands your space, a piece of your physical world. It demands your mental energy as a tiny item on a long, subconscious inventory list. It demands your emotional energy as you worry about it being broken, lost, or stolen. Each possession is a tiny anchor, and while one anchor is insignificant, 1,000 tiny anchors can hold even the strongest ship motionless in the harbor, preventing it from sailing into the open ocean of life. This is why the process of decluttering, when done with intention, is a profound spiritual practice. It is the physical application of the principle of non-attachment. It is a meditation in action. As you pick up an object, you are not just holding a piece of matter. You are holding a story, a memory, an identity. That sweater you haven't worn in 5 years might represent the person you once hoped to be. Those books gathering dust on the shelf might represent an intellectual image you wanted to project. That kitchen gadget still in its box might represent a failed aspiration to a healthier lifestyle. To mindfully let go of an object is to let go of the story attached to it. It is a declaration that your identity is not bound to your possessions. It is an act of releasing a past self to make way for the person you are becoming. The practice is simple and can begin today. You do not need a rigid system. You only need to approach your belongings with compassionate curiosity. Pick up an object, hold it in your hands. Take a conscious breath and ask it a few honest questions. Does this object serve my life right now? Not the life I lived 5 years ago, or the fantasy life I imagine for the future, but my actual life, today. Does this object actively bring me joy or utility? Or does it bring with it a subtle feeling of guilt, of obligation, of being stuck? With each object you decide to release, you are performing a small act of liberation. You are not just creating physical space in your home, you are creating mental space in your mind. The energy that was tied up in owning, storing, and worrying about that object is now freed. Your visual field becomes calmer. Your subconscious inventory list becomes shorter. Your mind becomes lighter, clearer, more focused. You begin to untangle yourself from the web of things and rediscover the simple joy of being. There is a story from ancient Greece about the philosopher Diogenes the Cynic that perfectly captures the spirit of this discovery. Diogenes was a radical minimalist who believed that true happiness lay in living in accordance with nature and rejecting the artificial desires of society. He lived in a large clay jar in the marketplace of Athens and owned almost nothing. His most prized possession was a simple wooden cup, which he used to drink water from the public fountains. One day, he saw a young boy who had no cup at all. The boy simply cupped his hands together, scooped water from the fountain, and drank from them. Diogenes watched, transfixed. A look of profound insight dawned on his face. He stood up, took his own cup, and threw it away, declaring, "A child has schooled me in simplicity." In that moment, he realized that even his simple cup was an unnecessary complication, a barrier between himself and the direct experience of life. This story is not a command for us to throw away our cups. It is an invitation to look at our own lives and ask, where am I clinging to an unnecessary cup? What am I holding on to that is complicating my life, that is standing between me and a more direct, joyful, and free existence? The richness that simplicity offers is the answer to this question. When we clear away the clutter, we discover that what we have created is not an empty life, but an open one. The space that was once filled with things can now be filled with life itself. The time we once spent managing our possessions can now be spent nurturing our relationships. We have more time for conversation, for connection, for being present with the people we love. The money we once spent on acquiring more stuff can now be spent on experiences that enrich our soul's travel, learning a new skill, attending a concert, or simply enjoying a walk in nature. The mental energy that was once consumed by the low-grade hum of material anxiety can now be devoted to our creative pursuits, our spiritual practice, our health, and our community. We discover that a sunset is more beautiful than any plasma screen, that a deep conversation is more valuable than any designer handbag, and that the feeling of inner peace is a greater treasure than any accumulation of wealth. We stop trying to buy happiness and start to cultivate it from within. By letting go of the things we do not need, we finally have the space to find what we truly want. This experience of lightness, of freedom, of creating space by releasing what we no longer need, naturally leads us to our next practice. For once we have decided to let something go, we have a beautiful opportunity. We can simply discard it, or we can participate in one of the most powerful, heart-opening, and healing practices of all, the act of giving it away. The journey into simplicity teaches us the joy of letting go. We clear our homes and our minds of the non-essential, and in the space that opens up, we discover a profound sense of peace and freedom. As we stand in this newfound clarity, holding the objects we have decided to release, we are presented with a beautiful and transformative opportunity. We could simply discard them, but there is a more powerful, more healing path available. This path takes the simple act of letting go and elevates it into an act of profound connection. It is the practice of generosity, known in the Buddhist tradition as dana. This practice is the ultimate antidote to the voice of scarcity, the most potent medicine for the wound of financial anxiety. It is here that we learn that the source of abundance is not in getting, but in giving. In the modern West, we often think of giving through the lens of charity. It is framed as a moral duty, an obligation for those who have more to help those who have less. While this is a noble sentiment, it can subtly reinforce a sense of separation, the giver and the receiver, the powerful and the needy. The practice of dana, however, offers a revolutionary shift in perspective. The primary intention of dana is not to save the other person, it is to heal ourselves. The ultimate beneficiary of a generous act is the one who performs it. This is because the act of giving is a direct and powerful counterforce to the roots of our suffering. The mind of scarcity, the mind of anxiety, is a contracted mind. It is like a clenched fist, tightly gripping its possessions, its security, its very sense of self, terrified of losing anything. Greed, attachment, and fear are all manifestations of this contracted state. Generosity is the practice of intentionally opening that fist. With every act of giving, no matter how small, we are training the mind in the art of letting go. We are creating a new habit, a new neural pathway that is based on openness, trust, and connection, rather than fear and separation. The true gift of dana is the liberation of the giver's heart from the prison of its own selfishness. This ancient wisdom is now being validated by modern science. Numerous psychological studies have shown that people consistently report higher levels of happiness and well-being when spending money on others than when spending it on themselves. This effect is found across cultures and income levels. Giving activates the reward centers in our brain, releasing chemicals like oxytocin that foster feelings of connection and joy. This tells us that generosity is not some lofty, unattainable spiritual ideal. It is a fundamental component of our own human wiring for happiness. When we are stingy and fearful, we are working against our own nature. When we are generous, we are aligning ourselves with a deeper truth of our interconnectedness, and our own nervous system rewards us for it. The practice of dana is a way to consciously tap into this wellspring of joy. So, how do we practice? The beauty of dana is its profound accessibility. It is not reserved for the wealthy. The value of the gift lies not in its monetary size, but in the quality of the intention behind it. You can begin exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. Generosity can be expressed in countless ways. Yes, it can be the giving of money to a cause you believe in or a person in need, but it can also be the giving of your time, volunteering for an organization or helping a neighbor with a chore. It can be the giving of your skills, offering your expertise to someone who could benefit from it. It can be the giving of a kind and encouraging word to someone who is struggling. It can be the giving of your full, undivided attention to another human being, listening to them deeply without judgment. It can be as simple as leaving a larger tip than expected for a service worker, a small, anonymous gesture of appreciation. And, of course, it can be the giving of the material possessions you have just mindfully decluttered from your life, allowing objects that no longer serve you to serve someone else. The practice is to make giving a conscious and joyful part of your life. Before you give, take a moment to connect with your intention. Wish for the gift to bring happiness and ease to the recipient. As you give, be fully present, and afterward, take a moment to notice the feeling in your own heart. Does it feel lighter, more open, warmer? This feeling is the fruit of the practice. This is the feeling of abundance. By giving, you are sending a powerful message to the deepest parts of your psyche. You are telling the voice of scarcity, "You are wrong. I have enough. I have enough to share." There is a famous story from the time of the Buddha that perfectly illustrates the true nature of dana. Many wealthy patrons, including kings and merchants, would come to make lavish offerings to the Buddha and his community of monks. They would offer gold, fine silks, and expensive foods. One day, a poor elderly woman who had spent her life begging on the streets came forward. She had listened to the Buddha's teachings and her heart was filled with inspiration. She wanted to make an offering, but all she had in the world were 2 small copper coins. It was just enough to buy her a tiny portion of food for the day. She stood for a long time, contemplating. Then, with a heart full of pure devotion, she placed both coins into the offering bowl. Later, the Buddha's chief attendant, Ananda, was sorting the day's offerings. He saw the piles of gold from the kings and the 2 tiny coins from the woman. He asked the Buddha which offering was the most valuable. The Buddha replied that while the gifts of the kings were great, they were given from their surplus. Their lives would not change at all after their offering. The old woman, however, had given everything she had. Her gift, though small in monetary value, was the greatest of all, because it was born from a heart of complete generosity and faith. It came from a place of true abundance of spirit, not abundance of wallet. This story teaches us that it is not what you give, but the spirit in which you give, that matters. A small gift given with a full heart is more powerful than a large gift given with a calculating or indifferent one. The practice of dana systematically dismantles the architecture of fear that surrounds money. The scarcity mindset tells us to hoard, to accumulate, to protect what is ours at all costs. Generosity demonstrates, through direct experience, that this is a path to misery. By joyfully and willingly giving, we discover a paradoxical truth. The more we give, the wealthier we feel. We are not depleting ourselves. We are participating in a flow, a current of well-being that is larger than our small, separate self. We are affirming our trust in life. This profound shift in our relationship to the resources that flow out of our lives naturally leads us to examine the other side of the equation. We have looked at how we spend, how we compare, how we simplify, and how we give. Now we must turn our attention to the source. How do we earn the resources we manage? How can we engage in the world of work and commerce in a way that is not a source of stress, but a source of meaning and alignment with our deepest values? This brings us to the crucial topic of right livelihood. Having explored the flow of resources out of our lives through our spending, our simplicity, and our generosity, we must now turn our attention to the source. Our financial life is an ecosystem, and for it to be healthy, the water that flows into it must also be clean and life-giving. For most of us, this inflow comes from our work, the activity that occupies the largest portion of our waking hours. Our career is not separate from our spiritual path. It is, for better or for worse, a central arena where our values are tested and our practices lived. The Buddhist tradition addresses this directly through the fifth element of the Noble Eightfold Path, samma ajiva, or right livelihood. This principle invites us to transform our work from a source of stress and a mere means to a paycheck into a source of meaning and an integrated part of our journey to peace. Right livelihood is far more than simply earning a living in a way that is legal. At its core, it is the practice of non-harming, or ahimsa, applied to our professional lives. On the most basic level, this means abstaining from work that causes direct and obvious harm to other beings. The classical texts list professions like being a weapons dealer, a butcher, a slave trader, or a seller of poisons and intoxicants. In our modern world, we can expand this list to include work that is built on exploitation, that knowingly damages the environment, that profits from dishonesty, or that fuels the very cycles of craving and anxiety we are trying to heal. This principle provides us with a clear ethical compass. It asks us to look honestly at how our work impacts the world. However, for many people, the luxury of choosing a perfectly ethical and fulfilling career feels like a distant dream. The pressures of debt, family responsibilities, and a competitive job market mean that our choices are often limited. It is crucial to understand that the practice of right livelihood is not meant to be a source of guilt. It is a North Star, a direction to orient ourselves towards, not a stick with which to beat ourselves. The practice begins not by immediately quitting our job, but by transforming our relationship to the work we are already doing. This is the inner dimension of right livelihood, and it is accessible to every one of us, regardless of our job title. The most profound factor in right livelihood is not what you do, but how you do it. You can begin by bringing the practice of mindfulness into your workday. Whatever your task is, bring your full attention to it. If you are writing an email, just write the email without simultaneously checking your phone or thinking about your next meeting. If you are stocking a shelf, feel the weight of the object in your hands, notice its shape and texture, and place it with care. If you are listening to a client or a colleague, listen with your whole being. This simple act of returning your attention to the present moment, over and over, has a transformative effect. It cuts through the stress of multitasking, reduces the feeling of being overwhelmed, and can turn even the most repetitive drudgery into a form of meditation. Beyond mindfulness, you can consciously cultivate a spirit of service. Every job, no matter how humble it may seem, exists to serve others in some way. A janitor is not just mopping a floor. They are creating a clean, safe, and pleasant environment where other people can work and thrive. A barista is not just making coffee. They are providing a small moment of warmth, comfort, and ritual in someone's busy day. A bus driver is not just driving a route. They are safely connecting people to their families, their jobs, and their communities. By intentionally connecting with the aspect of service in your work, by reframing your tasks as an offering to others, you can infuse your day with a sense of purpose that transcends the paycheck. There is an old Zen story of a master woodcarver who was commissioned to create a new set of figures for a temple. For weeks, he did nothing but meditate and fast, purifying his mind. He told his patrons, "First, I must quiet my own heart. If I am filled with thoughts of fame, or money, or criticism, that greed and fear will flow from my heart, through my arm, into my chisel, and the wood itself will be infected with it. But if I can make my mind still and clear, a vessel for beauty and peace, then that spirit will flow through me into the wood, and the carving will bring peace to all who see it. This woodcarver understood the deepest truth of right livelihood. His work was not just a craft, it was a spiritual practice. His attitude, his intention, transformed the simple act of carving wood into a sacred offering. We can all learn to be this woodcarver. We can bring an intention of peace, service, and presence to our work, whatever it may be. While we can transform our experience of our current job, there are times when a job is genuinely toxic or ethically compromising, causing undeniable harm to ourselves or to others. In these situations, the practice of right livelihood may indeed call for a change, but this transition must also be undertaken mindfully. Leaving a job out of pure aversion, anger, or burnout often leads to impulsive decisions and further suffering. The mindful approach to a career transition involves several steps. First, you must acknowledge the harm clearly and compassionately, without being consumed by hatred for your employer or your situation. Second, you must cultivate a positive aspiration, a clear vision of the kind of wholesome work you want to move towards, not just what you are running from. Finally, you create a patient and deliberate plan to get there. This may involve saving money to create a financial cushion, taking classes to learn new skills, or networking in a new field. This transforms the act of quitting from a desperate escape into a courageous and wise journey toward a more aligned way of life. When we earn our living in a way that is mindful, ethical, and aligned with our values, the money that flows into our lives has a different quality. It feels clean. It is not tainted with the psychic residue of guilt, harm, or exploitation. This kind of income is easier to manage, easier to save, and easier to give away with a joyful heart. It completes the virtuous cycle of our financial ecosystem. Right livelihood is the vital practice that integrates our spiritual life with our economic reality. It ensures that the 9-to-5 is not a detour from our path, but is the path itself. With these foundational practices, mindful spending, releasing comparison, embracing simplicity, cultivating generosity, and engaging in right livelihood, we have applied the essential first aid to our financial wounds. We have begun to stabilize our relationship with money, transforming it from a source of anxiety into a field of practice. Now, with this foundation of stability beneath our feet, we are prepared to venture into deeper waters. We are ready to explore the very heart of mental freedom, the ultimate principle that liberates us not just from financial anxiety, but from all forms of clinging and suffering. The profound and subtle art of non-attachment. Having laid a new foundation for our financial lives through mindful action, we are now ready to approach the very heart of the matter. We have addressed the how of our financial behavior. Now we must transform the fundamental state of mind from which all action arises. This brings us to what is perhaps the most crucial and often most misunderstood principle on the path to inner peace, the practice of non-attachment. The mere mention of this term can conjure images of cold-hearted indifference, a joyless rejection of the world, or a vow of extreme poverty. But these are fearful caricatures of a profound and liberating truth. Non-attachment is not about turning away from life. It is the secret to engaging with life fully, freely, and without fear. It is the master key that unlocks the prison of anxiety, allowing us to experience the blessings of our life, including our wealth, without being enslaved by them. It is the distinction between holding money in your hand and having it wrapped around your heart. Before we can understand what non-attachment is, we must be very clear about what it is not. It is not emotional detachment. It does not mean you become a robot, incapable of feeling joy, love, or sadness. In fact, the opposite is true. Non-attachment allows you to feel your emotions more fully and purely, because your happiness is no longer dependent on them. You can feel the deep joy of connection with a loved one without the clinging fear of losing them. You can feel the sadness of a loss without it shattering your entire sense of self. You are the deep ocean that can experience the passing of every wave on its surface without being fundamentally disturbed. Secondly, non-attachment is not a rejection of material well-being. It is not a command to renounce all your possessions and live a life of destitution. The problem has never been the money in the bank or the roof over your head. The problem is the clinging in the mind. A billionaire can be deeply non-attached, viewing their wealth as a tool for good and ready to let it go if circumstances change. A person with very little, on the other hand, can be intensely and painfully attached to their few belongings, living in constant fear of losing them. Non-attachment is an inner quality of freedom, not an outer condition of poverty. Finally, it is not indifference or apathy. It does not mean you stop caring about your work, your family, or the state of the world. It means you learn to act with great care, skill, and compassion, while releasing your grip on the outcome. You plant the seeds, you water the garden, you tend it with all your heart, but you understand that you do not control the weather. You do your absolute best, and then you let go. The true meaning of non-attachment lies in a simple yet profound distinction: the difference between possessing something and clinging to it. Imagine you are holding a beautiful, smooth stone in your hand. You can hold it in an open palm. You can feel its coolness, appreciate its colors, and enjoy its presence. When it is time to put it down, you simply open your hand and let it go. This is skillful possession. Now imagine taking that same stone and making a tight fist around it. Your knuckles are white, your forearm is tense. You are so focused on not dropping it that you can no longer even see its beauty. Your entire energy is consumed by the act of grasping. This is clinging. You are no longer holding the stone. The stone is now holding you. This is the state of mind that creates so much of our financial anxiety. We have our assets, our investments, our homes, our careers, and we are clenching our minds around them in a tight fist of fear. Non-attachment is the practice of learning to live with an open hand. It is the ability to have, to appreciate, to use, and to manage the things in our life, while knowing that our core well-being, our inner peace, is not dependent on them. There is a famous teaching story that illustrates this trap of clinging perfectly. In some parts of the world, hunters have a clever way of catching monkeys. They take a coconut or a gourd, make a hole in it just large enough for a monkey's open hand to slide through, and place some rice or a sweet treat inside. They then chain the coconut to a stake in the ground. A monkey, drawn by the bait, will come along, slip its empty hand into the coconut, and grasp the rice, making a fist. But now, the opening is too small for its closed fist to pass through. The monkey pulls and shrieks, frantically trying to free itself, but it cannot. The hunter can then calmly walk up and capture the monkey. The tragic irony is that the monkey is not being held by the trap. It is being held by its own greed. It is trapped by its own clenched fist. At any moment, all it has to do to be free is to open its hand, release the rice, and slip its hand out. But its attachment, its craving, is so strong that it will sacrifice its own freedom and its very life for a worthless handful of rice. We are all this monkey. We are so often trapped not by our external circumstances or mortgage, our job, our investments, but by our own mental fist, our own refusal to let go of our clinging to a specific outcome or identity. Freedom is always available in the simple, courageous act of opening our hand. So how do we practice this? How do we learn to unclench the fist of the mind? The practice is one of meditative observation, of shifting our identification from the fleeting contents of our lives to the stable container that holds them. Think of your awareness, your true nature, as the vast, open sky. It is limitless, clear, and always present. It is fundamentally peaceful. The events of your life, including your financial life, are like the clouds. Sometimes there are big, dark, stormy clouds of financial loss, of debt, of fear. Sometimes there are beautiful, fluffy, white clouds of financial gain, of a bonus, of a successful investment. These clouds drift into the sky. They stay for a while. And then, inevitably, they change shape, drift away, and dissolve. returning to the emptiness from which they came. The sky is not harmed by the storm clouds. The sky does not try to grasp and hold on to the beautiful clouds. It allows them all to come and go, remaining in its own vast, peaceful nature. The practice of non-attachment is the practice of learning to identify with the sky rather than the clouds. We can observe our thoughts, our feelings, and the circumstances of our life, including our bank balance, as mere weather patterns passing through the vast sky of our awareness. We can care for our finances, we can plan, we can act skillfully, but we do so with the deep, abiding understanding that our true self, the sky, is not defined or threatened by the passing clouds. This is the ultimate freedom. When we are not attached, we can finally and truly enjoy our wealth. We can savor a good meal without the subtle fear that we won't be able to afford it again. We can appreciate our beautiful home without being in a constant state of low-grade anxiety about its property value. We can celebrate a success at work without it inflating our ego and setting us up for a painful fall. Non-attachment is not about pushing the world away. It is about inviting the world in, fully and completely, but allowing it to pass through us without getting stuck. It is the master key to a life of engagement without entanglement, of wealth without worry. This profound understanding of non-clinging naturally raises a practical question. If we are not to be ascetics who reject the world, and we are also not to be indulgers who are trapped by the world, then how exactly should we live? What is the wise and balanced path between these two extremes? This question leads us directly to the Buddha's most practical and celebrated guide to a harmonious life, the middle way. The principle of non-attachment provides us with our ultimate destination, a mind that is free, open, and at peace, regardless of external circumstances. But to navigate the complex territory of our daily lives, we need more than a destination. We need a path. We need a practical, real-world strategy that allows us to engage with our finances without falling into the traps of craving and fear. The Buddha, through his own life experience, provided just such a strategy. It is perhaps his most famous and practical teaching, the middle way. This is the art of walking a path of profound balance, a path that avoids the treacherous ditches on either side of the road. In our financial lives, these ditches are the extremes of reckless indulgence and fearful asceticism. The story of the Buddha's own awakening is the story of discovering the middle way. He was born a prince, Siddhartha Gautama, and for the first part of his life, he was completely shielded from all forms of suffering. He lived in a palace of unimaginable luxury, surrounded by every conceivable sensual pleasure. He had the finest clothes, the most delicious foods, and endless entertainment. This was the extreme of indulgence. Yet, he found that even with everything a person could possibly want, he was not truly happy. There was a deep, underlying unease, a sense that something profound was missing. So he left the palace and threw himself into the opposite extreme. He joined a group of ascetics and practiced severe self-mortification. He starved his body until he was nothing but skin and bones. He held his breath until his head felt like it would split open, and he slept on beds of thorns. He believed that by punishing his body, he could liberate his spirit. But this path, too, only led to misery and weakness. It did not lead to wisdom. Having experienced both extremes and found them wanting, Siddhartha sat down, nourished his body with a simple meal, and resolved to find a different path of balance, of clarity, of wakefulness. This was the middle way, and it was this balanced path that led to his enlightenment. In our relationship with money, we are constantly tempted by these same two extremes. The first is the well-trodden path of indulgence. This is the philosophy of you only live once, interpreted as a license for unchecked consumption. It is the voice of the hungry ghost, telling us to satisfy every craving, to chase every pleasure, no matter the long-term cost. It is a life lived on credit cards and driven by impulse. From the outside, it can look glamorous and exciting, a life full of new things, exciting trips, and fine dining. But beneath the surface, it is a life of profound anxiety. It is the hedonic treadmill spinning at maximum speed, requiring ever greater levels of spending to produce the same fleeting thrill. It is a path that inevitably leads to the stress of debt, the shame of living beyond one's means, and a feeling of being constantly behind, forever chasing a satisfaction that never arrives. This is not freedom, it is a gilded cage. On the other side of the road lies the opposite ditch, the extreme of fearful asceticism. This is not the noble simplicity we spoke of earlier, which is born from wisdom and leads to joy. This is a grim, joyless frugality that is born from a deep-seated scarcity mindset. It is the person who, despite having sufficient resources, is mentally impoverished. They are so terrified of future loss that they are unable to enjoy their present life. This is the path of the clenched fist. They hoard every penny, denying themselves not only luxuries, but often basic comforts and investments in their own well-being. They might neglect their health to avoid a medical bill, refuse to spend money on education or training that could improve their life, or feel intense guilt over buying a simple coffee with a friend. Their life is governed not by values, but by a paralyzing fear. While the path of indulgence leads to a poverty of finances, this path of extreme frugality leads to a poverty of spirit. It is a shrunken, anxious life. The miser may die with a large number in their bank account, but they have lived a life of misery, which is the very root of the word. Both extremes, the path of craving and the path of aversion, lead to suffering. The Buddha's teaching on this is beautifully captured in a story about a monk named Sona. Sona had been practicing meditation with such fierce, punishing effort that he was on the verge of giving up. The Buddha, knowing that Sona had been a famous musician before becoming a monk, went to him and asked a simple question. Sona, in your life as a musician, what would happen if you tuned the strings of your lute too tightly? Sona replied, Lord, if the strings were too tight, they would snap. The Buddha then asked, and what would happen if the strings were too loose? Sona answered, Lord, if they were too loose, they would make no sound. Finally, the Buddha asked, and what would you have to do to produce a beautiful, harmonious sound? Sona said, Lord, I would have to tune the strings so they are not too tight and not too loose, but balanced just right. The Buddha smiled. So it is, Sona, with the spiritual path. An effort that is too tense leads to restlessness. An effort that is too slack leads to laziness. You must tune your practice like you tuned your lute, finding the middle way of balance. This is the task before us, to tune our financial lives. The middle way of finance is not a specific budget or a rigid set of rules. It is a dynamic, mindful balance of our resources that supports a life of well-being. A well-tuned financial life has several key characteristics. It includes mindful spending, where we consciously use our money to support our true needs and deepest values. This means providing for our necessities, but also investing in our health, our education, and in meaningful experiences that enrich our lives rather than just accumulating things. It also includes wise and patient saving and investing. This is not hoarding driven by fear. It is a compassionate act for our future selves, calmly building a foundation of security that allows us to navigate life's challenges with more grace and less panic. Finally, a well-tuned financial life always includes joyful giving. A portion of our resources continually flows back out into the world through acts of dana, which keeps our hearts open and reminds us that we are part of an interconnected whole. The middle way is the practical, day-to-day expression of non-attachment. It is the wisdom to use money as a skillful tool for living a good life, rather than being a slave to either the craving for it or the fear of losing it. It is the path of financial harmony, this balanced, well-tuned perspective, this ability to walk steadily without falling into the ditches on either side, is our greatest asset as we learn to face one of the most fundamental and often challenging truths of our existence. The truth that nothing lasts forever. How does a person walking the middle way relate to the inevitable gains and losses of a world in constant flux? This brings us to the crucial wisdom of impermanence. Having found our footing on the middle way, the balanced path between extremes, we are now equipped to face one of life's most fundamental and unavoidable truths. It is a truth that governs everything from the life of a star to the fluctuations of the stock market, from the cells in our body to the balance in our bank account. This is the universal law of anicca, or impermanence. In the West, we are often conditioned to view change, especially when it involves loss, as a kind of failure or a problem to be solved. We strive for permanence, for stability, for security that is unshakable. But this striving is like trying to build a dam out of sand in the middle of a flowing river. It is a struggle against the fundamental nature of reality, and it is a primary source of our anxiety. To embrace the wisdom of impermanence is not to become a pessimist. It is to become a realist. It is to learn how to move with the current of life gracefully, rather than being battered by our resistance to it. Everything changes. Nothing is static. Look around you. A mighty mountain seems to be the very symbol of permanence, yet over millennia, wind and rain will wear it down to dust. The seasons turn, one into the next, in an endless, graceful cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. Our own bodies are a constant river of change. We are not the same person physically that we were 7 years ago. Our thoughts, our feelings, our moods, they are the most fleeting of phenomena, arising and passing away moment by moment. The financial world is perhaps one of the most vivid and dramatic demonstrations of anicca in action. The daily charts of the stock market are a real-time graph of impermanence, a chaotic dance of ups and downs. Entire industries that once seemed invincible, like empires, have crumbled and been replaced by new technologies. Companies are born, they flourish, they decline. Economies expand in booms and contract in recessions. Our own careers follow this pattern, with periods of rapid growth and opportunity, and periods of challenge, stagnation, or unexpected change, like a job loss. To see this constant flux, not as a flaw in the system, but as the very nature of the system itself, is the beginning of wisdom. The suffering associated with these changes does not come from the change itself. A market downturn is simply a market downturn. A job loss is simply a job loss. These are neutral events. The pain, the anxiety, the despair, these arise from our reaction to the event. They come from our clinging to a reality that has already passed, our fierce resistance to what is now present. Imagine you are standing in a powerful river. If you try to brace yourself, to stand rigid against the force of the water, you will be thrashed and exhausted. The river's power will feel like a violent assault. But if you relax, allow your body to become buoyant, and learn to navigate the currents, that same river can carry you safely downstream. Resisting change is like trying to stand rigidly in the river. When we see our portfolio value drop and we react with panic, frantically selling everything, we are resisting the current. When we obsess over our financial newsfeed, our stomach in knots with every dip, we are resisting the current. This resistance, this mental fight against the reality of what is the source of our deepest anxiety. It is the infamous second arrow. The first arrow is the event itself, the loss. It may be painful, but it is unavoidable. The second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves, the panic, the blame, the despair, the fear. Understanding impermanence is the art of learning how to dodge this second arrow. There is a classic parable that speaks to this wisdom. A mighty oak tree stood in the middle of a field, its thick trunk and strong branches a symbol of power and permanence. It looked down with some disdain at the slender reeds growing by the riverbank, which swayed with every little breeze. "I am strong and unbending," the oak thought to itself. "I do not yield to anything." One day, a great storm arose. The wind howled with incredible force. The oak stood rigid, resisting the gale with all its might. The wind pushed harder and harder, until finally, With a terrible cracking sound, the great trunk splintered, and the oak came crashing to the ground. Meanwhile, the humble reeds simply bent with the wind. They yielded to its power, sometimes bending so low that their tops touched the very earth. They did not resist. When the storm had passed, the mighty oak lay broken and defeated. The flexible reeds slowly rose up again, unharmed. The oak tree is the mind that clings to permanence, the mind that believes its portfolio must only go up, that its job must be secure forever. This rigidity becomes brittle under the pressure of life's inevitable storms. The reed is the mind that has cultivated an understanding of anicca. It is flexible, adaptable, and resilient. It bends, but it does not break. It survives the storm and lives to see the sun again. How do we become less like the oak and more like the reed? We do it through practice, by intentionally familiarizing our mind with the truth of impermanence during times of calm, so that it is not a terrifying shock during times of storm. We can do this through simple contemplation. Take a few moments in a quiet day to sit and reflect on the changing nature of your experience. Notice your breath, how each inhalation is born and each exhalation dies. Notice your thoughts, how they appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Acknowledge that everything you perceive with your senses is in a state of flux. Then, you can gently extend this contemplation to your financial life. Silently affirm to yourself, "My income is subject to change. My investments are subject to change. The economy is subject to change." The purpose of this is not to create fear, but to cultivate acceptance. It is a form of emotional and mental training, building the resilience you will need when change inevitably arrives. This deep understanding naturally leads to a wiser and more peaceful approach to financial planning. A person who grasps impermanence is less likely to engage in risky, short-term speculation. They are not trying to get rich quick by timing the market's every move. Instead, they become a patient, long-term investor. They create a diversified portfolio, which is itself an admission that some assets will go up while others go down. They create a plan and they stick to it, not out of blind rigidity, but out of the wisdom that reacting emotionally to every market swing is a losing game. They plant their seeds, tend their garden, and trust in the long-term seasons of growth without panicking at every cold snap. By truly and deeply accepting the law of impermanence, we move from being a victim of life's changes to being a wise participant in its dance. We stop fighting the river and learn how to swim. This perspective shift, from seeing the world as a collection of static, solid things to seeing it as a dynamic, flowing process, has another profound implication. If everything is constantly changing and in flux, then nothing can exist in isolation. Every change sends ripples throughout the entire system. This insight into the fundamental interconnectedness of all things is the next crucial step in our journey, a step that takes us from our personal financial world into the vast, interdependent web of life itself. The wisdom of impermanence teaches us to be like the flexible reed, bending with the winds of change rather than breaking in resistance. As we cultivate this resilience, we begin to notice something profound. Because everything is in a constant state of flux, nothing can exist in a vacuum. A rising tide lifts all boats. A falling one lowers them. A storm that fells one tree changes the light for the entire forest floor. This insight that everything is connected to everything else is the natural conclusion of understanding impermanence. It dissolves the illusion that our lives are private, isolated affairs. It reveals that our financial decisions, which often feel like the most personal and confidential aspects of our existence, are in fact powerful acts that send ripples out into a vast, interconnected ocean. We tend to think of our money as ours. We earn it, we manage it, we spend it. It feels like a closed system. But what if this is a fundamental misunderstanding? What if every dollar we hold is not a static object, but a current of energy, a vote we are about to cast? What if every transaction, from buying a cup of coffee to making an investment, is a ballot that shapes the world we all share. This perspective lifts us out of the small, anxious story of our personal finances and places us into the grand, sweeping narrative of our shared reality. It asks us to see our financial life not just through the lens of personal gain or loss, but through the lens of cause and effect on a global scale. To understand this profound interconnectedness, we can turn to one of the most beautiful and evocative metaphors from Mahayana Buddhism, the image of Indra's net. Imagine, stretching out to infinity in all directions, a vast cosmic net. This is the net of the god Indra. At every single node where the threads of this net cross, there hangs a single, brilliant, perfectly polished jewel. The net is limitless, and so the jewels are countless. But here is the most wondrous part of the image. If you were to look closely into the surface of any one of these jewels, you would see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire net. Not only that, but each of the reflections in that single jewel also contains the reflection of all the other jewels, and so on, ad infinitum. Each jewel is a microcosm of the whole, and the whole is present in every part. This is a hologram of the universe. We are each a jewel in this net. Our existence, our life, our very being is a reflection of all the other jewels. We are shaped by our family, our community, our environment, our culture, and, in turn, our single jewel is reflected in every other. Our actions, our words, our thoughts, our choices, they ripple out and are reflected throughout the entire net. There is no true separation. There is only an intricate, shimmering web of mutual co-creation. Let us bring this cosmic image down to earth and apply it to a single, seemingly insignificant financial act: the purchase of a cheap t-shirt. On the surface, it is a simple transaction. We exchange a few dollars for an item of clothing. But if we look at this t-shirt as a jewel in Indra's net, what do we see reflected in it? We see the reflection of a cotton farmer, perhaps in a distant country, and the reflection of the wages they were paid, the pesticides used on the crop, and the water diverted from their local community to grow it. We see the reflection of a garment factory worker, their working conditions, the length of their day, and the safety of their building. We see the reflection of the cargo ship that burned fossil fuels to transport the shirt across the ocean. We see the reflection of the advertising executive who crafted the campaign that made us feel we needed this shirt. We see the reflection of the retail clerk who sold it to us. And we see the reflection of our own mind, our desire for something new, our response to a low price, our own participation in this vast, global chain of causes and effects. That simple t-shirt is not a simple t-shirt at all. It is a convergence point, a story of the entire world. The low price we paid did not make the true cost disappear. It simply externalized it, pushing the cost onto the underpaid worker, the polluted river, the carbon-filled atmosphere. Our isolated act of getting a good deal is inextricably linked to the well-being of countless other jewels in the net. This understanding is not meant to paralyze us with guilt. We cannot possibly trace the history of every single item we purchase. The purpose is to awaken us from the slumber of unconscious consumption. It is to cultivate a mindful curiosity. It invites us to ask questions. Where did this come from? Who made it? What were the conditions of its creation? What is the true cost of this item, beyond the price tag? This awareness naturally leads to the modern practices of conscious consumerism and ethical investing. When we choose to buy from a local artisan, we are voting for our local community. When we choose to support a company with transparent and ethical labor practices, we are voting for human dignity. When we invest our money, we are not just buying a stock or a bond, we are providing the capital, the very lifeblood that allows a company to operate. If we invest in a company that pollutes, we become participants in that pollution. If we invest in a company that is developing sustainable energy, we become participants in building a healthier future. Our investment portfolio becomes a powerful expression of our values. This principle of universal interconnectedness has a formal name in Buddhist philosophy. It is called pratitya samutpada, which can be translated as dependent origination or interdependent arising. It is a core insight into the nature of reality, and it can be summed up in a simple formula. When this is, that is. When this is not, that is not. From the arising of this, that arises. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. Everything arises in dependence on other factors. A flower cannot exist without the sun, the soil, the rain, and the seed. It is co-created by a universe of conditions. Our financial reality works in exactly the same way. From the arising of our demand for cheap, disposable goods, there arises a system of exploitative labor. From the ceasing of our support for such systems, we contribute to the ceasing of that exploitation. This is an incredibly empowering realization. It moves us from feeling like a powerless cog in a massive, impersonal machine to understanding that we are a vital thread in the great net. Our choices matter. Our actions create ripples. We are co-creating the world with every dollar we spend, save, and invest. This shift in perspective transforms our relationship with money from a self-centered pursuit into a profound responsibility. Money is no longer just a tool for our own security and pleasure. It becomes a primary instrument through which we express our connection to the world, a vehicle for our compassion. This is not a burden. It is a profound opportunity. It infuses our financial life with meaning and purpose. We are no longer just managing a budget. We are curating a life that is in harmony with a larger whole. After looking outward and seeing our deep connection to this vast, interdependent web, a natural question arises. If true well-being is not found in isolated, individual accumulation, then where is it found? If happiness is not about getting more from the net than anyone else, then what is it? This leads us to the heart of inner wealth, the treasure that can only be cultivated within. It brings us to the practice of contentment. Having journeyed outward to the farthest reaches of Indra's net and seen how our lives are intricately woven into the fabric of the world, we now make the most important journey of all, the journey home to the center of our own heart. We have explored the nature of our mind, our habits, our relationship with a world of constant change and connection. After all this searching, seeking, and understanding, we arrive at a crucial question: what is the ultimate treasure we are looking for? What is the final destination of this path? Is it a specific number in a retirement account? Is it a portfolio that is immune to market swings? The wisdom of the ages tells us that the greatest wealth we can ever possess is not something we can acquire, but something we can uncover. It is an inner quality, a state of being that, once cultivated, can never be lost or stolen. It is the practice and realization of santuti, the Pali word for contentment. This is the discovery that the feeling of enough is the most priceless treasure in the universe. Contentment is a deeply misunderstood concept in our culture of striving. We often confuse it with complacency, with laziness, or with a lack of ambition. We fear that if we become content, we will stop growing, stop trying, stop contributing to the world. But this is a profound misreading of its nature. Complacency is a state of apathy born from resignation. Contentment is a state of peace born from wisdom. It is not about giving up on our goals. It is about giving up the neurotic, stressful belief that our happiness is contingent on achieving them. It is the ability to be genuinely at peace with the life we have right now, with all of its imperfections, while still being able to work skillfully to improve our future. It is the end of the if-only game. If only I had a better job. If only I had a bigger house. If only I didn't have this debt. This inner monologue is a form of self-torture, a constant war with reality that keeps us trapped in a state of dissatisfaction. Contentment is the declaration of peace in this war. It is the radical act of accepting this moment, this life, this reality as a complete and workable foundation for happiness. The mind of discontent is like a faulty scanner, constantly sweeping the horizon of our life, programmed only to detect what is missing, what is wrong, what is not enough. It magnifies our problems and minimizes our blessings. It lives perpetually in a fantasy of a better future or a regretful past, and it is never, ever at home in the present. It is the mind of the hungry ghost, always famished, always seeking the next meal, but never able to be nourished. The mind of contentment, by contrast, has learned to rest. It acknowledges challenges and difficulties, but it also consciously and deliberately looks for what is good, what is right, what is already present. It finds a quiet richness in the simple, overlooked details of daily life. Its default state is not one of lack, but one of gentle appreciation. This shift from a mindset of lack to a mindset of contentment is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of training. And the single most powerful tool for this training is the practice of gratitude. Gratitude is the engine of contentment. Our brains, for evolutionary reasons, have a built-in negativity bias. We are wired to notice threats, dangers, and problems more readily than we notice blessings. This was useful for surviving in the wild, but in our modern world, it often leads to a chronic state of anxiety and dissatisfaction. A gratitude practice is a conscious and systematic retraining of our attention. It is like taking our mind to the gym to strengthen the appreciation muscle. This practice can be simple. Every evening before you sleep, you can take a moment to reflect on your day and consciously name 3 specific things for which you are grateful, particularly things related to your material well-being. This practice directly counteracts financial anxiety. For example, first, you might bring to mind your bed. Feel, in your imagination, the comfort of the mattress, the warmth of the blankets. Feel a sense of gratitude for this safe, comfortable place to rest your body. Second, think of a specific meal you ate today. Remember its flavors, its textures, and the feeling of nourishment it provided. Feel a sense of gratitude for the simple fact of having enough food to eat. Third, think of the roof over your head. Become aware of the walls that protect you from the wind and the rain. Feel a sense of gratitude for this fundamental security. This practice, done consistently, begins to rewire your brain. It shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have. This can also be an informal practice woven throughout your day. When you turn on a faucet and clean water comes out, you can feel a flicker of gratitude. When you flick a switch and a light comes on, you can feel a moment of appreciation. When you fill your car with gasoline, you can acknowledge the incredible global effort that brought that energy to you. When your mind is filled with dozens of these small moments of appreciation, the grand anxieties about not having enough have less and less space to take root. You begin to see that, despite your challenges, you are living in a state of profound abundance. There is a story of a deva, celestial being living in a heavenly palace, filled with every imaginable pleasure, who looked down and saw a monk meditating alone in the forest. The monk had nothing but a simple robe, an alms bowl, and the shelter of a tree, yet his face radiated a peace and happiness that the deva, with all his riches, had never known. Perplexed, the deva descended to the forest and asked the monk, "Venerable sir, you have nothing. What is the source of your incredible happiness?" The monk smiled and replied, "Friend, my happiness comes from nothing at all." The deva was even more confused. "Nothing? How can one be happy with nothing?" the monk explained. "In your heavenly realm, your happiness is dependent on something: a beautiful sight, a pleasant sound, a delicious taste. It is an additive happiness. My happiness is a subtractive happiness. It comes from the absence of disturbance. Because there is no fire of greed burning in my heart, no poison of ill will clouding my mind, no frantic fear of loss chasing mate, is precisely because nothing is bothering me that I am at peace. My wealth is the absence of affliction. This is Santuti. It is the ultimate wealth. It is the peace that comes not when you finally get everything you want, but when you no longer need anything more to be happy. Contentment is the priceless jewel we find when we stop seeking treasures outside of ourselves. It is the ultimate financial security, because it is a form of wealth that can never be diminished by a market crash, a job loss, or any external event. It is a portable, internal, and inexhaustible resource. With this profound sense of inner abundance as our foundation, we can now approach the practical tools of finance not from a place of fear, lack, and anxiety, but from a place of wisdom, peace, and clarity. How does a person who already feels truly wealthy create a budget or a financial plan? This is not a contradiction. It is the final and most skillful stage of our journey, where we learn to integrate our inner peace with our outer actions. Having arrived at a place of inner contentment, a state of profound wealth that is independent of our external circumstances, we can now turn back to face the world of practical affairs with a new sense of purpose and peace. It is time to engage with the very tools that once caused us so much anxiety, but to do so from this new foundation of abundance. And there are few words in the financial lexicon that evoke more fear, resistance, and dread than the words budget and financial plan. For most of us, these words feel like a cage. They represent restriction, deprivation, and a painful judgment of our past failures. We see a budget as a list of things we cannot do, a stern parent shaking a finger at our desires. But this entire perspective is born from the scarcity mindset we are working to dissolve. What if we could radically reframe this? What if a financial plan was not a prison but a path to freedom? What if a budget was not an instrument of judgment but a profound expression of love? The old story we tell ourselves about budgeting is why it so often fails. We see it as a painful chore, a necessary evil. We look at the numbers and feel a sense of shame or rebellion. The budget becomes a declaration of our limitations, a constant reminder of what we lack. It feels like a diet of deprivation, and just like a crash diet, our willpower eventually crumbles and we binge, overspending to escape the feeling of confinement. We then feel guilty, and we avoid looking at the budget for weeks or months, letting our financial life run on anxious autopilot until the pain becomes great enough that we force ourselves to look again, repeating the cycle of fear and avoidance. This entire painful dance is predicated on the view that a budget is a wall built to keep us from what we want. It is a tool of a fearful mind. But from a place of contentment and wisdom, we can create a new story. In this new story, a financial plan is not a cage, it is a map. A budget is not a list of restrictions. It is a written expression of your values. It is a declaration of what matters most to you, and a plan to direct your life's energy, which is what money truly represents towards those things. The process of creating a mindful budget does not begin with a spreadsheet. It begins with a quiet moment of reflection. It begins with the question, what kind of life do I truly want to cultivate? What values are most important to me? Is it freedom, security, growth, learning, community, compassion, health? Take the time to write these values down. Now, you can begin to design a financial plan that brings these values to life. Each category in your budget becomes a direct reflection of what you hold sacred. The line item for retirement savings is no longer a boring obligation. It becomes your future peace and freedom fund. The money you allocate to it is a tangible act of love and compassion for the person you will be in 10, 20, or 30 years. The line item for charitable giving is your compassion in action fund. The category for education is your personal growth fund. The savings for a vacation becomes your joyful experiences and connection fund. Note, seen in this light, budgeting is transformed from a restrictive chore into a creative and empowering act. You are no longer just tracking numbers. You are designing a life. You become the mindful gardener of your own existence. A wise gardener does not simply scatter seeds at random and hope for the best. They study the land, they observe the patterns of sunlight, and they create a thoughtful plan. They decide where to plant the vegetables that will provide nourishment, where to plant the flowers that will bring beauty and joy, where to plant the trees that will provide shade and shelter for years to come. and where to let the ground lie fallow to replenish its strength. This garden plan is not a restriction on the gardener's freedom. It is the very tool that allows the gardener to co-create a lush, abundant, and beautiful garden. Your income is the land and the sunlight you have been given. Your budget is your garden plan. You are the mindful gardener, intentionally and lovingly directing your resources to cultivate a life of deep nourishment, beauty, and peace. With this new understanding, the regular act of reviewing your finances can be transformed from a moment of anxiety into a form of meditation. Once a month, you can create a small ritual. Set aside a peaceful time when you won't be disturbed. Make yourself a cup of tea. Light a candle if you wish. Then, open your bank statements or your budgeting app, not with a sense of dread, but with the same gentle, non-judgmental curiosity you would bring to observing your breath. You are simply watching the flow of energy. As you look at the numbers, you are not looking for reasons to blame yourself. You are a compassionate observer. I see a lot of energy flowed toward eating out this month. I remember feeling very busy and stressed. That is understandable. Interesting, spending on hobbies was lower than I intended. I must remember to prioritize my own joy and creativity. The purpose of this budget meditation is not to find fault, but to see your patterns clearly, without judgment. When you see a place where your spending is out of alignment with your stated values, you don't react with self-criticism. You react with gentle understanding, and you make a small, kind course correction for the month ahead. It is like the gardener noticing a plant that needs a little more water or a weed that needs to be gently removed. Modern technology, like budgeting apps, can be powerful allies in this practice. They are not our bosses or our judges. They are simply mindfulness tools, mirrors that reflect our own behavior back to us with clarity, allowing us to see ourselves without distortion. By reframing our relationship with these tools, we reclaim our power over our financial lives. We move from being a fearful victim of our finances to being the wise and loving caretaker of our resources. A financial plan becomes a testament to our deepest intentions, a physical manifestation of our commitment to living a life of purpose and peace. We have now created our map. We have a clear sense of our values and a plan to live by them. We have cultivated an inner state of contentment and a wise, balanced approach to our actions. But even the most skilled navigator with the best map in the world will encounter storms. The seas of life are unpredictable. Unexpected events will occur. Losses will happen. And in those moments, despite our best plans, the ancient emotion of fear will inevitably arise. How do we meet these moments? How do we face the storms of financial uncertainty? Not with panic that capsizes our boat, but with a calm and steady heart that allows us to ride the waves. This requires us to cultivate the final quality of a liberated mind, the profound and unshakable peace of equanimity. We have come so far on this journey inward. We have learned to observe our minds, to walk the middle way, and to create a financial plan rooted in our deepest values. We have built a sturdy vessel, designed a reliable map, and learned to navigate with skill. Yet, even the most seaworthy ship with the most accurate map will encounter storms. The ocean of life is, by its very nature, unpredictable. Markets will crash, jobs will be lost, unexpected expenses will arise, and plans will be thrown into disarray. These are the inevitable first arrows of existence. In these moments, all of our practice is put to the test. All the planning in the world cannot, by itself, prevent the arising of fear. What we need in the heart of the storm is an anchor, a center of gravity, so profound and so stable that it can hold us steady while the winds howl and the waves crash around us. This is the practice of upekkha, or equanimity. It is the crown jewel of the four sublime states, the unshakable peace of a liberated heart. Equanimity is often misunderstood in the West as a form of detached indifference, a cold and distant apathy. This could not be further from the truth. Indifference is a state of aversion, of shutting down the heart to avoid pain. It is a sign of fear, Equanimity, on the other hand, is a state of profound openness and boundless love. It is a love so vast and so unconditional that it can hold all of life's experiences without being shaken. It is the capacity to be fully present with joy and with sorrow, with gain and with loss, with pleasure and with pain, without being thrown off balance. Imagine a great, ancient mountain. The mountain sits in majestic stillness. It experiences the gentle warmth of the summer sun, the lash of the autumn rain, the bite of the winter blizzard, and the caress of the spring breeze. It is touched by all of it. Yet its fundamental, solid, grounded nature remains unchanged. The weather is just the weather. The mountain remains the mountain. To cultivate equanimity is to cultivate this mountain-like quality in our own mind. It is to remain centered and at peace amidst the ever-changing weather of our lives. In Buddhist teachings, these are known as the 8 worldly winds: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. The untrained mind is like a leaf, blown helplessly about by these winds. The mind of equanimity is the mountain, which allows the winds to blow but is not controlled by them. There is a simple and profound teaching of the Buddha that perfectly illustrates how this works in practice. It is the parable of the 2 arrows. The Buddha said that when an ordinary person experiences a painful event, such as a physical injury or a financial loss, they are struck by an arrow. This is the first arrow. It is the unavoidable pain of life. It strikes everyone, enlightened or not. But then, the ordinary person, in reaction to the pain of the first arrow, immediately shoots a second arrow into themselves. This second arrow is our mental reaction. It is the arrow of fear, my life is over. It is the arrow of self-blame, how could I have been so stupid? It is the arrow of anger, of despair, of catastrophic thinking. This second arrow is the one that causes our true suffering. It is the one that transforms pain into anguish. The Buddha taught that a wise person still gets struck by the first arrow. They feel the pain of the loss, but they have learned not to shoot the second arrow. They do not add a layer of mental torment on top of the initial event. Equanimity is the practice of learning to let the first arrow land without reaching for the quiver of the second. How do we apply this directly to a moment of intense financial fear? Imagine you open your credit card statement and the balance is shockingly high, far more than you can comfortably pay. This is the first arrow. The pain, the shock is real. Now, the second arrows begin to fly. I'm a failure. I have no self-control. I'll never get out of this debt. I'll lose everything. Panic sets in. Your heart races. Your stomach churns. This is the self-inflicted suffering. To practice equanimity in this moment is to practice a kind of spiritual first aid. The first step is to simply pause. Before you get swept away by the storm of reactivity, just stop. Take one deep, grounding breath. Feel your feet planted firmly on the floor. This simple act interrupts the panic cycle and brings you back to the present moment. The second step is to turn inward and gently name what you are feeling. Without judgment, just acknowledge, this is fear, this is panic. Naming the emotion creates a little space around it, robbing it of its overwhelming power. Third, notice where the feeling lives in your body. My heart is beating fast. There is a tightness in my chest. Simply observe these as pure physical sensations without piling a dramatic story on top of them. Fourth, observe the thoughts themselves as thoughts. See the story, I am a failure, as just a sentence appearing in your mind, like a dark cloud appearing in the sky. You do not have to believe it. You do not have to argue with it. You just see it. Ah, there is the thought of failure. Finally, you zoom out. You remember the wisdom of the mountain. You remind yourself, this feeling of fear is impermanent. This painful thought is impermanent. I am the vast, stable awareness that is observing this storm. I am not the storm itself. This practice does not magically make the debt disappear. It does not instantly erase the feeling of fear. What it does is prevent the fear from hijacking your mind. It allows you to hold the painful reality of the situation in a larger container of calm, spacious awareness. When you are not in a state of panic, your rational mind can come back online. You can look at the bill with clarity and begin to think about practical solutions. You can create a payment plan. You can look for areas to cut back. You can seek advice. You are able to respond to the situation with wisdom rather than reacting with a terror that only makes things worse. Equanimity is our unshakable shelter. It is the inner resilience that allows us to face the truth of our financial lives, both the good and the bad, with courage, clarity, and grace. It is the culmination of our healing journey, the point at which we are no longer a victim of our circumstances or our emotions. Having developed this profound inner stability, this mountain-like heart that can weather any storm, our relationship with money undergoes its final, most beautiful transformation. It ceases to be a source of anxiety or a measure of our worth. It is no longer our master. It simply becomes a tool in our hands. And so, the question arises, from this place of strength, freedom, and peace, what do we choose to build with this tool? How do we use the resources we have, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all? This is the final stage of our journey, to see our wealth as an instrument of service. Having journeyed through the fierce storms of fear and anchored ourselves in the calm harbor of equanimity, our relationship with the world of money is forever changed. The anxieties that once held us captive have lost their power. The endless striving for more has been replaced by a quiet sense of enough. We have, in essence, healed the wound. From this newfound place of inner stability and peace, the very purpose of wealth undergoes a final, beautiful, and radical transformation. When we no longer need money to validate our existence, to soothe our insecurities, or to purchase a fleeting happiness, we are finally free to ask a much more profound question: what is money for? The answer that arises from a clear and compassionate heart is simple. Money is a tool for service. It is a current of energy that can be skillfully directed to alleviate suffering and cultivate well-being, not just for ourselves, but for all beings. For most of our lives, the pursuit of wealth is a fundamentally self-centered activity. We work to secure our own future, to provide for our own family, to acquire things for our own pleasure, and to build a life that solidifies our own ego. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. It is a natural and necessary stage of development. But from the vantage point of inner contentment, this self-centered model begins to feel incomplete, like a song with only one note. Having discovered an inexhaustible wellspring of peace within, the obsessive drive to accumulate more external resources begins to fade. Having realized our profound interconnectedness through the wisdom of Indra's net, the idea of hoarding resources for our own isolated benefit feels like trying to hoard water in a sieve. It is a misunderstanding of how the universe works. The heart that is no longer contracted in fear naturally expands with compassion. And compassion, when it sees suffering, naturally wishes to help. In this state, wealth, whether it is $10 or $10 million, is no longer seen as a private possession to be defended. It becomes one of the most powerful and practical instruments of compassion we have. It is love made tangible. This is not a call to a joyless life of self-sacrifice. It is the discovery of a deeper, more enduring, and more meaningful form of joy. The happiness we derive from serving others is far more stable and nourishing than the fleeting thrill of satisfying a personal craving. It is the difference between drinking a sugary soda and drinking from a clear mountain spring. One gives a temporary rush, the other provides deep, life-sustaining hydration. When our financial life becomes an expression of our compassionate heart, every act of earning, saving, and spending is infused with this higher purpose. The anxiety lifts because the focus is no longer on me and my fragile security. The focus is on the flow, on how we can best act as a conduit for good in the world. So, how does this look in practice? It manifests in every area of our financial lives. Our relationship with giving is transformed. It moves beyond a sense of duty or a reactive response to a charity appeal. It becomes a central pillar of our financial plan, a joyful and proactive expression of our values. We might dedicate a certain percentage of our income not as a charity line item, but as our world well-being fund. We can then mindfully research and support organizations that are doing effective work in areas that touch our heart, whether it is protecting the environment, educating children, caring for the elderly, or supporting the arts. This conscious, thoughtful philanthropy becomes a source of immense satisfaction. Our investment strategy also undergoes a revolution. It is no longer guided solely by the question, what will bring the highest financial return? It is now guided by the question, what kind of world do I want my money to help build? This is the realm of ethical and impact investing. We consciously choose to divest from industries that cause harm: fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, predatory lending, and actively seek out investments in companies that are part of the solution. We can help fund renewable energy projects, innovations in sustainable agriculture, or companies with exemplary labor practices. Our portfolio ceases to be a source of anxiety and becomes a silent, powerful force for positive change, working for the good of the world even while we sleep. If we are an entrepreneur or a business leader, the very definition of success changes. The goal is no longer simply to maximize profit for shareholders. The business itself becomes a vehicle for service. We strive to create a workplace that is a source of right livelihood for our employees, a place where they are treated with dignity, paid a fair wage, and given opportunities to grow. We create products or services that genuinely benefit our customers. We run our business in a way that respects the environment and contributes positively to our community. The bottom line expands from a single metric of profit to a triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, recognizing that true prosperity is one in which all stakeholders flourish. Even on a smaller, more personal scale, this mindset is transformative. We become more generous in our daily interactions, leaving larger tips, supporting local businesses, buying from artists and craftspeople in our community. We might create a personal generosity fund that we can use to spontaneously help a friend in need, or to buy a meal for a homeless person, not out of pity, but out of a simple recognition of our shared humanity. This journey fundamentally changes our sense of identity. We evolve from being a consumer to being a steward. A consumer's primary function is to use up resources for personal gratification. It is a mindset rooted in lack. A steward, on the other hand, understands that the resources that flow through their hands are not truly their own. They are a temporary trust from the universe. The steward's role is not to accumulate as much as possible, but to manage and direct those resources with wisdom, care, and a deep sense of responsibility for the well-being of the whole. This is the ultimate expression of a healed relationship with money. It is the point at which our financial life becomes a seamless extension of our spiritual practice. It is no longer a source of conflict or anxiety, but a field of boundless opportunity for generosity, connection, and joy. It is the freedom of a truly wealthy heart. This idea of a wealthy and powerful person dedicating their life and resources to the service of a higher good is not merely a modern ideal. It has a powerful precedent at the very foundations of the Buddhist tradition. To fully grasp the potential of this path, it is incredibly helpful to look at the living example of a man who embodied it perfectly, the great merchant and chief patron of the Buddha, Anathapindika. The path to a healed relationship with money, a path of service and peace, can feel like a grand and abstract ideal. To make it real, to see that it is an attainable human possibility, it helps to walk for a time in the footsteps of someone who embodied it completely. In the history of Buddhism, there is no greater example of a wise, compassionate, and generous layperson than the man known as Anathapindika. His story is not a myth, but a practical blueprint, a case study in how to live a life of immense worldly success that is fully integrated with a profound spiritual purpose. He demonstrates that wealth is not an obstacle to enlightenment, but can be a powerful vehicle for it. Anathapindika was not his birth name. He was born Sudatta, a brilliant and highly successful banker and merchant living in the city of Savatthi. He earned the name Anathapindika, which means the feeder of the forlorn, or friend to the poor, because of his boundless, legendary generosity to those in need. He was, by all accounts, one of the wealthiest men of his time. Yet his story is not about the accumulation of wealth, but about its wise and joyful distribution. His journey began when he was visiting another city on business and heard that a fully enlightened one, a Buddha, was in the world. The suttas say that a thrill of joy so powerful ran through him that he could barely sleep. He rose in the pre-dawn darkness and went to the grove where the Buddha was staying. As he approached, the Buddha, seeing his sincerity, simply said, "Come, Sudatta." In that moment of being seen and welcomed by enlightened wisdom, Sudatta's life was forever changed. He achieved the first stage of sainthood, becoming a stream enterer, a person who has had a direct glimpse of ultimate reality and is guaranteed to achieve full liberation within 7 lifetimes. This powerful spiritual attainment did not lead him to abandon his business or his family. Instead, it infused his worldly life with a sacred purpose. Having found this priceless treasure, his first thought was to share it. He immediately invited the Buddha and his community of monks to spend the next rainy season near his home city of Savatthi, so that his own people could hear the teachings. The Buddha agreed, and now Anathapindika had a task: to find a suitable piece of land for a monastery. It had to be a place of beauty and peace, quiet enough for meditation but close enough to the city for the monks to go on their alms round and for lay people to visit for teachings. He searched and found the perfect location, a beautiful park known as Jetavana, or Jeta's Grove, which belonged to the crown prince, Jeta. Anathapindika approached the prince and asked to buy the park. The prince, who was not particularly interested in selling this pleasant retreat, laughingly dismissed him with an absurd price. "This park is not for sale," he said, "unless, of course, you are willing to cover the entire ground with gold coins." Any other person would have walked away, seeing this as an insult or an impossible demand. But Anathapindika's heart, filled with faith, saw only an opportunity. Without hesitation, he replied, "The park is mine at that price." He immediately sent for his servants, who began to arrive with cartloads of gold coins from his treasury, and they began, to the prince's astonishment, to pave the ground of the park with gold. This incredible act is a perfect illustration of non-attachment in action. Anathapindika did not see his gold as the source of his identity or his happiness. He understood its true nature. It was a transient, conditioned phenomenon, a tool to be used. He saw the incomparable, timeless value of creating a space where the Dharma, the teachings of liberation, could flourish for generations to come. He was joyfully trading a temporary material wealth for an eternal spiritual one. The story goes that as the last small patch of ground near the entrance was about to be covered, Prince Jeta, who had been watching this extraordinary display of faith, had a profound change of heart. He stopped Anathapindika and said, "No more. Your faith has inspired me. Let this last piece of land be my own offering. I will build a great gatehouse for this monastery." And so, the great Jetavana monastery was established through this combined act of generosity, becoming the place where the Buddha would spend the majority of his teaching career. Anathapindika's support did not end with this one spectacular gift. He became the chief patron of the community, tirelessly ensuring the monks had what they needed: food, medicine, robes, and shelter. His life became a continuous act of service, but his path was not without challenges. There is a story that, due to a combination of floods washing away some of his wealth and his own boundless giving, Anathapindika fell into poverty. He became so poor that he and his family could only afford to eat broken rice from a clay bowl. During this time, a deva, or celestial being, who was living in the eaves of his house, became concerned. The deva appeared to him and advised him to stop his giving. "You are a wise man. the diva said. You should focus on rebuilding your business and securing your fortune. You can return to your giving when you are wealthy again. Anathapindika's response is a testament to the depth of his wisdom. He gently explained to the deva that his material wealth was transient and unreliable, but his true wealth, his faith, his virtue, and his practice of generosity was his real treasure. He would continue to give what little he had, because it was this practice that nourished his heart. His commitment to his values was not dependent on his bank balance. His equanimity was so profound that it was unshaken by both gain and loss. The life of Anathapindika provides us with a timeless blueprint for an enlightened financial life. He teaches us that worldly success and a deep spiritual practice are not mutually exclusive. They can and should enrich one another. He shows us that the true purpose of wealth is not to inflate the ego or to indulge in sensual pleasure, but to create good in the world, to support the conditions for peace and wisdom to flourish. He demonstrates that the measure of a person's wealth is not what they manage to accumulate, but what they are able to joyfully give away. And most importantly, he proves that a heart rooted in wisdom and compassion is a source of happiness that cannot be touched by the ups and downs of the market or the changing fortunes of life. We can all, in our own measure, practice being a modern Anathapindika. It does not require paving the ground with gold. It requires the intention to use the resources that pass through our hands, whether they are great or small, for the benefit of all. It is the recognition that the source of Anathapindika's great deeds was not his vault of gold, but his heart full of faith. And this points us to the final, essential truth of our entire journey. The ultimate treasure is, and always has been, within. We have walked a long and winding path together. We began in the quiet desperation of a cluttered life, feeling the phantom pains of scarcity and the insatiable hunger of a ghost within. We journeyed outward to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, seeing ourselves reflected in the shimmering jewels of Indra's net. And we journeyed inward to the deepest chambers of the heart, confronting the subtle mechanics of fear and desire. We have learned to pause, to breathe, to give, to simplify, to work with purpose, and to find a steady balance on the middle way. We have followed in the footsteps of the great Anathapindika, who paved the earth with gold not to display his wealth, but to demonstrate his faith. And now, after all this searching, we arrive at the final, most essential truth, the discovery that resolves the entire quest. The treasure we have been seeking has been with us all along. The ultimate financial freedom, the only true and lasting wealth, is the infinite treasure of a peaceful mind. This is the great reversal of our entire journey. We began with the assumption that our inner state of anxiety could be fixed by changing our outer circumstances. We believed that if we could just solve the problem of money, we would finally have peace. The path of wisdom has shown us the exact opposite. We must first cultivate inner peace, and from that state of being, our money problem dissolves. It was never about the numbers in the account. It was always about the noise in the mind. The entire structure of our consumer society is built on the project of seeking internal solutions from external sources. We feel empty, so we buy something to fill the void. We feel insecure, so we chase status to feel important. We feel anxious, so we accumulate money to feel safe. This is like trying to quench a thirst by eating sand. The more we do it, the thirstier we become. The spiritual path is the recognition that we are standing right next to a clear, cool spring of living water. The spring is our own innate capacity for awareness, for contentment, for peace. The practice is simply to stop eating the sand and to turn and drink from the water that has always been available. This understanding reveals the ultimate paradox of wealth, a truth that we can see playing out all around us. A person can command vast fortunes, own multiple homes, and have access to every imaginable luxury, and yet live every day in a private hell of anxiety. They are tormented by the fear of losing their wealth, consumed by the suspicion of those around them, and driven by a relentless need to accumulate even more. never feeling like they have enough. They are the poorest rich person in the world. Their life is a testament to the fact that money cannot buy peace of mind. Conversely, we can find a person of simple, modest means: a teacher, an artist, a gardener who radiates a palpable sense of joy and contentment. Their life is not defined by what they lack, but is enriched by what they have. Strong relationships, a love for their work, a deep appreciation for the beauty of the world, and a mind that is at ease. They are the richest poor person in the world. They have discovered that the feeling of abundance is an inside job. These two figures prove, beyond any doubt, that wealth is not a financial condition, it is a state of consciousness. The ultimate asset, then, is not found on a balance sheet. The greatest treasure is a mind that has been liberated from the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. It is a mind that is no longer hijacked by the insatiable craving for more greed. It is a mind that is no longer disturbed by aversion to what is unpleasant, no longer caught in the bitterness of envy or blame, hatred. And it is a mind that is no longer operating under the fundamental misunderstanding of reality, delusion, a mind that sees impermanence, interconnectedness, and the nature of the self with clarity. This clear and peaceful mind is the only true security we can ever attain. We spend our lives building financial fortresses against the future. We buy insurance policies, we build diversified portfolios, we create emergency funds. These are all skillful and necessary actions, but they are forms of worldly security, and as such, they are all subject to the law of impermanence. A currency can be devalued overnight. A stock market can crash. A business can fail. A natural disaster can wipe out our physical assets. But the peace of a cultivated mind, the wealth of inner contentment, is an asset that can never be taken from you. It has no market value because it is priceless. It cannot be stolen. It cannot be taxed. It is the one investment that yields an incorruptible and eternal dividend. It is the only insurance policy that truly covers everything. There is a beautiful parable that serves as the perfect conclusion to our quest. It is the story of a desperately poor man who wandered from town to town, begging for his food and sleeping in shelters. His clothes were ragged, his body was weary, and his heart was heavy with his misfortune. He spent his days searching for work, for food, for some kind of salvation from his miserable state. What he did not know was that many years ago, a dear and compassionate friend, seeing that he was heading for a life of hardship, had done something extraordinary. As the man slept, this friend had secretly taken a priceless, flawless jewel and carefully sewn it into the lining of the poor man's coat. The man awoke the next day and, unaware of his hidden treasure, continued on his journey of struggle and seeking. He traveled for years, enduring incredible hardship, always looking for wealth outside of himself, all the while carrying an unimaginable fortune with him every step of the way. We are all this man, and our innate capacity for peace, clarity, and contentment is this priceless jewel. It has been with us from the very beginning. It is woven into the very fabric of our being. The entire spiritual journey, the mindfulness, the compassion, the wisdom is not about acquiring something new. It is the process of finally stopping, of turning our attention inward, and of discovering the infinite treasure that we have been carrying with us all along. The healing of our financial wounds is, in the end, the discovery of this jewel. It is the realization that the security and peace we have been desperately seeking in the world of money is, and always has been, right here within us. Our true home is not a house we can buy, but a mind we can calm. Our true wealth is not a number we can earn, but a contentment we can cultivate. With this jewel in hand, we are finally, truly, and completely free. Our long journey together is now drawing to a close. We began in a place that is familiar to so many, a landscape of quiet desperation, marked by the constant hum of anxiety, the pressure of a world that never sleeps, and the profound feeling of being adrift, even when surrounded by the supposed markers of success. We named this feeling, we gave it the ancient word dukkha, not to amplify the suffering, but to honor it, to acknowledge its presence as a fundamental truth of the unexamined life. From that honest starting point, we did not look outside for a cure, for another distraction, or a temporary fix. Instead, we turned our gaze inward. We followed the river of our discontent back to its source, and there we found it, not in our circumstances, but in the nature of our own minds, in the relentless thirst and clinging, the subtle and powerful force of craving that asks reality to be other than it is. But in finding the cause, we also found the most hopeful of all truths, the truth of cessation, the radical possibility that the storm can end, that the fever can break, and that a state of profound peace, which we call nirvana, is not a myth or a distant heaven, but a potential locked within our own consciousness. We were given a map, an ancient and noble path with 8 intersecting roads, a practical guide for walking from confusion to clarity. The ultimate message of this path, the final whisper of wisdom it offers, is this: peace is not a destination you must struggle to reach, nor is it a product you can acquire. It is not something you must build, or earn, or prove yourself worthy of. It is, and always has been, your fundamental nature. It is the vast, silent, clear blue sky that is always present, even when obscured by the storm clouds of your thoughts, your fears, and your desires. The practice, then, is not about becoming a new person. It is not about adding more layers to who you are. It is a journey of unbecoming. It is the gentle, courageous process of letting go of everything that is not truly you. It is the shedding of borrowed beliefs, of conditioned reactions, of the heavy armor of the ego. You are not the clouds, you are the sky. You are not the beggar, you are the person who has simply forgotten the priceless gem sewn into the very fabric of your being. The entire path is nothing more than learning to recognize the treasure you have been carrying all along. The tools are now in your hands. The wisdom of mindfulness, the warmth of compassion, the balance of equanimity, the clarity of right view, they are yours. The path may seem long, and the world will continue to be noisy and demanding, but you do not need to conquer the entire journey today. You do not need to become an enlightened master overnight. All that is ever asked is to begin. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. For us, that step is not even a movement of the feet. It is a single, conscious breath. Right here, right now, just this one. This is where the freedom begins.